Okay, so good evening, everyone out there. Welcome to another APDAWG meeting in 2021. Thank you all for sharing your Tuesday nights with us. We have another fascinating and potentially controversial topic, which is welfare problems of flat-faced dogs. Can we ever solve them? Hugely popular topic. We have another 500 people on tonight's event, so fully booked. And weirdly, it is a fascinating topic. Obviously, I'm a vet, but I also have an interest in advertising and what's out there. And as well as things like the Churchill advert, literally in today's paper, we had a picture of a brachy dog. Interestingly, this is for something called Team Dogs, which is coming soon for dog lovers. And on the other side of the page was a silly pet selfie of a pug puppy. So they are literally everywhere at the moment, brachy dogs, flat-faced dogs. So tonight's, as you know, tonight's event is following always the same structure. We're going to have 2 speakers to start with on other topics, and then we're going to have actually 6 speakers, international speakers, on brachiocephalic dogs. And some of these speakers are just, well, all of them are amazing, but some are from such incredible institutions that we're all going to learn loads tonight. I want to thank UK Centre for Animal Law for their support and Our Dogs newspaper. I want to introduce Dr. Lisa Cameron MP, who's tuned in with her rescue French Bulldog Rossi. She'll be introducing each speaker. And I also wanted to say apologies from Peter Egan, who can't be with us tonight, our patron, unfortunately. And if you are going to use Twitter tonight, then obviously follow us on APDAWG1, APDAWG1, and use the hashtag APDAWG, because I'll be on Twitter and I can sort of retweet stuff. Obviously, you can ask questions tonight. We're going to have a fantastic discussion afterwards. Please be polite, please be respectful. And I just want to mention 3-4 more things before we start. The next APDAWG in March will be about overseas and Romanian rescues. Date is to be confirmed. There's an A-Law event this Friday, which is about obviously dog welfare. And it's how do we protect dogs from exploitation and abuse, and what part can the law play in addressing these serious issues? That's on Friday. On Thursday, I'm actually presenting a support dogs event for rescue dogs and how they become assistance dogs. And then on the 18th of March, there's another very exciting event, which I can't reveal to you what it is yet, but there'll be 100 invites. It'll all be announced on our APDAWG newsletter, but you want to be part of that if possible. Okay, so make sure you're signed up to our newsletter. It'll be first come, first serve. I'm going to pass over to Lisa, who will introduce the first speaker. I'll just say a few words about Carol, one of my favourite people, done most incredible stuff over the years for dog welfare. And I'm really excited to hear her presentation, followed by Jake, who runs the most amazing animal protection services. This is the best thing about APDAWG personally for me. I get all my favourite people and I get to meet them every few weeks and hear the amazing work they're doing for dog welfare. So it's a pleasure for me to hand over to Lisa Cameron MP, who will introduce our speakers. And have a good night, everyone, and let's all learn stuff and make some progress.
Hey, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Lisa Cameron MP. For some reason, it says Jane on my screen. but just ignore that. I am, I promise you, Lisa. And I'm just welcoming everybody once again to our wonderful all-party dog advisory welfare group. Normally we would be in the House of Commons, and in the House of Commons we usually have in excess of 100 participants, but I have to say, since we've gone online, we've had upwards of 400 to 500 participants, and I'm noticing from the chat we've even got someone tuning in from Australia, and it's 6 AM on the next day, so that's amazing. Thank you for joining us, Anne Quain from Australia. We're going to have another wonderful evening ahead, and this time I'm determined to stick to time, so I'm going to be tough with the speakers this evening, and then it gives everybody time for those questions that you want to ask at the end. Thank you to Mark for all of the work that he does in terms of making sure that APDAWG is one of the most popular all-party groups in the House of Commons, and also one of the groups that people come to for advice regarding welfare of animals, particularly of dogs, and for all of the work that he's done in terms of Lucy's Law and so many other campaigns through legislation right across the United Kingdom. So first of all, this evening we have a wonderful speaker, Carol Fowler, who entered the world of dog welfare after her first dog suffered a painful neurological disease, a traumatic experience that led her to investigate the dog breeding industry and the issue of inbreeding and inherited diseases. So personal experience for Carol. She was looking at how human preferences for particular shape and size of dog has led to some physical extremes which can seriously impact a dog's health and also their quality of life. Carol set up charity and campaigning organisation Dog Breeding Reform Group to raise awareness of these serious health and welfare problems, and also to help puppy buyers make informed choices when purchasing a puppy. So thank you so much. Welcome to Carol. And we have 5 minutes, Carol, for the first presentation.
Hi, Mark, Lisa, and everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak on the subject of the 2018 Animal Welfare Regulations, breeding of dogs and protection of offspring. I'd like to put the issue of the protection of offspring into context and also introduce TBRG, if that's okay. Next slide, please, Tiffany. The dog on the slide is Bonnie, a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, the one who started it all for me. She had a painful inherited neurological condition linked to the shortened head shape of the Cavalier breed. Chiari malformation is widespread in the Cavalier breed and also exists in other small dog breeds. Next slide, please. We are an independent voice for dogs to ensure that they are bred to the high standards of health and welfare, including genetic health, and are free from problems rising from exaggerated and unnatural conformations. We provide help and guidance to members of the public who are seeking to buy a puppy. We're independent, and we will campaign for improvements in welfare regulations and challenge existing substandard practices. We support effective initiatives by the Kennel Club to improve pedigree dog health. Next slide, please. If I could take you back a few years to the Animal Welfare Act of 2006, very important act in terms of animal welfare, in which the 5 needs of animals were set out. Its need for a suitable environment, its need for a suitable diet, its need to be able to exhibit normal behaviour, any need it has to be housed with or apart from other animals, its need to be protected from pain, suffering, injury and disease. Next slide, please. That's the key one, protection from pain, suffering, injury and disease. Unfortunately, the 2006 Act does not include offspring. Next slide, please. So in 2018, a new Animal Welfare Act was, it's not an Animal Welfare Act, regulations were introduced. And all dog breeders who breed 3 or more litters of puppies per year must have a local authority licence, meet health and welfare requirements, and be subject to regular inspections. Also within these regulations are those breeders who breed below the licensing threshold, 1 or 2 litters, but are selling puppies as a business in order to make a profit. Next, please. And 2018 regulations do protect animals from inherited conditions. So Schedule 6 states, no dog may be kept for breeding if it can reasonably be expected on the basis of its genotype, phenotype or state of health, that breeding from it could have a detrimental effect on its health or welfare, or the health and welfare of its offspring. Next slide, please. So where are the loopholes in this piece of legislation? Well, unlicensed breeders, those who breed under 3 litters a year, sometimes called hobby breeders, are not subject to local authority inspection and control. These are the majority of breeders in the UK. If hobby breeders are not subject to LA control, then the law only applies to them in theory, not in practice, and any action would be difficult, if not impossible. Next slide, please. And more loopholes, obviously the problem of enforcement, lack of expertise on the part of local authority licensing inspectors, and possibly it is a low priority for local authorities. Just note that there is a local authority steering group currently working on this in order to standardise procedures and offer guidance and advice to all local authorities. Next, please. DBRG recommends that breeders who are below the licensing threshold should be registered by the local authority and subject to inspections. Then all breeders will be identified by a license or registration number. Next, please, trying to keep to the 5 minutes. The role of the Kennel Club in improving dog health and welfare is vital. Next, please. So initiatives that the Kennel Club have brought in to improve dog health include the canine health schemes for hip dysplasia, elbow dysplasia, eye disease, and CMSM. Coefficients of inbreeding are available, which indicate the probability of how genetically similar parents are. Effective population sizes have been produced to show how many unrelated individuals there are in a breed population. Estimated breeding values for hip dysplasia and elbow dysplasia estimates the dog's risk of developing HD and ED. DNA tests for single gene diseases, breed health and conservation plans, and the assured breeder scheme. Next, please. I wanted to mention the puppy contract, which was brought in 2012. This is a universal puppy contract that was brought in by the RSPCA and Animal Welfare Foundation, which DBRG supports and promotes. It empowers puppy buyers and ensures good practice from breeders. The breeder completes the contract before a puppy is sold with information about the puppy and its parents. This will include details of any health screening test the puppy's parents have had and experiences that the puppy has had to prepare him or her for life in a new home. The breeder's signature means the information is true and complete. The buyer's signature confirms that they will meet the puppy's future health and welfare needs. Sadly, the KC does not support the puppy contract, but has one of its own for the Assured Breeder Scheme. Next, please. In the last couple of years, two important national documents have been produced by the Canine and Feline Sector Group to encourage breeders to breed ethically. We wish these were promoted more widely by DEFRA and local authorities. We wish that the KC would support these when providing advice to breeders, instead of just paying lip service to them. A genuine collaborative approach here would raise standards. Next, please. So why aren't the 2018 regulations and Kennel Club initiatives not working at present? Regarding 2018, unlicensed breeders are in practice not subject to local authority inspection and control. Regarding the Kennel Club and its initiatives to encourage pedigree dog breeders to breed for health rather than appearance, these remain optional for its breeders. The majority of puppy buyers still purchase a puppy without doing proper research into the health and welfare of the parents or the knowledge, skill and compassion of the breeder. The demand for puppies is such that breeders don't need to bother. To date, the UK does not recognise animal sentience. The state of health of the nation's dogs is such that urgent and enforceable measures are required. Otherwise, Schedule 6 of the 2018 regulations is meaningless. Next, please. Stakeholders. We hear this word a lot, don't we? What does it mean? Next slide, please, Tiffany. The only stakeholder that's important are the dogs. We have moulded and shaped them to suit our purposes. They have come to depend on us humans for everything, that cannot speak for themselves. Think of them, not us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol, and that was extremely informative, and I'm sure, in fact, we've already got some questions down the side, so it's generated a lot of discussion already. We'll move quickly on to Jake Lloyd. Jake is the Director and Senior Investigating Officer at a relatively new charity, Animal Protection Services. Jake enjoyed a background in government as a criminal investigator, our very own Columbo of the evening, before joining full-time at the Animal Protection Services earlier this year. So Jake also sits as the Secretary on the General Committee of the Private Prosecutors Association, advocating for private prosecutions as an important tool to get justice on the behalf of animals and to help protect their health and welfare. Welcome to Jake.
Thank you, cheers. I can't see the, oh, I can see the presentation. Grand. You can go straight to the next slide if you don't mind, Tiffany, thank you. So yeah, I completely echo the comments by Carol in that laws are useless without enforcement. And that's where we come in, I hope. So as already been said, we're a relatively new charity. We exercise the right to act as a prosecutor. We work closely with local authorities and police forces, and we have good relationships with quite a lot of them. We share intelligence and also provide operational support, so executing warrants on the ground with local government and the police. We work with some of the top animal welfare solicitors and barristers to prosecute these cases, because I firmly believe that animals deserve the best representation in court, and for that purpose we engage those specialist lawyers. Next slide, please, Tiffany. So just to clarify around what we investigate and prosecute, because it can often be quite confusing. So we focus on serious and organised criminality that involves animals. So dog fighting or animal fighting, illegal importation of puppies, illegal breeding and or the selling of puppies as a business, large-scale organised sale of sick puppies, wildlife crime offences. We don't shy away from red coat offences. If those need to be prosecuted, we will, and also the illegal trade in wildlife. Next slide, please, Tiffany. So looking at our objectives as a charity, we look to prevent, disrupt, and defeat, and those are our key objectives. We do that by a number of ways. So seizing assets through the use of proceeds of crime legislation, working with regional organised crime units to identify assets, to return proceeds of crime to the state, or also to victims. Securing disqualification orders and criminal behaviour orders to prevent further trading. Also, it's often said, well, it's great getting a disqualification order, but people will be back to it. We make sure that we monitor previous defendants to ensure that they're complying with disqualification orders, and we actively do that. We also believe that in order to campaign for stronger sentencing, we have to create a body of cases that allow us to have the data for stronger sentencing, and that's one of the things that we're doing in court. We were in court yesterday on an unlicensed breeding case, and the district judge actually asked, what is the sentencing for unlicensed breeding? We had to explain that because there haven't been any or very few prosecutions for unlicensed breeding, there wasn't actually any sentencing guidelines. Next slide, please, Tiffany. So yeah, I mean, Carol touched on this a bit, sort of what is the law, who needs to be licensed in terms of the English regulations. Unfortunately, the Kennel Club have lobbied for the Scottish regulations to be changed and for the business test to be removed out of the new Scottish regulations in September. We completely disagree with that. We think that there is not enough data to support what they are suggesting, which is that the business test discriminates against low volume breeders. So I guess who needs to be licensed in England currently? There's a couple of criteria, you can see them there. But it can be broken down very simply that anybody who is earning over £1,000 in profit in any 12-month period from the sale of animals as pets needs to obtain a license, and that meets the business test. That's been supported in court from a number of cases. So we absolutely stand by that. If you're earning over £1,000 in profit in any 12-month period, you need a license. Next slide, Tiffany. The other thing that we're actively sort of engaging on is statutory powers. So you would have heard the RSPCA recently mention that they wish to have statutory powers, and that's a great idea, and we fully support that. However, we also don't believe that it should be restricted to one body. So we believe that any animal charity that has field investigators should be able to apply for statutory powers, subject to conditions. In other countries, such as the USA being one good example, in California, SPCAs and humane societies can apply for statutory powers and exercise the powers of a police officer in the execution of investigating animal cruelty. And I think that should also happen here. Next slide, please. Just very quick about why statutory power is necessary. Ultimately, it's so that we can have prompt and effective enforcement. If we don't have prompt and effective enforcement, then actually the laws are meaningless, and animals have to wait longer to be rescued from a situation. So I think to give animal welfare charities the powers that are necessary to carry out these roles, actually I think that's really important. And it's sort of, there's many powers that can be granted, and applying for search warrants is one key power. And actually, currently the process is, if you need a search warrant, you have to go to the police. That can take weeks. If you go to a local authority and try and get a search warrant, unfortunately, local authority inspectors normally have a myriad of other responsibilities, and it takes a long time. It's very difficult, and for that reason, I think we need to speed up the process for animals. Next slide, please, Tiffany. So I guess the future, so we're going to continue on. We've got, over the next 5 months, we've got 130 prosecutions of unlicensed breeding over the next 5 months in multiple local authority areas across England. We're going to expand on our intelligence function to start gathering more intelligence on organised criminals that are involved in supplying dogs. Developing relationships with other organisations to prosecute their own investigations, working collaboratively, sharing resources. We think these are good ways forward. Also striving to be ambitious in using both civil and criminal strategies. So pursuit of crime, disqualification orders, and all of the other things that I've touched on. They're all ways that we can target offenders and make sure they don't do it again. That's it from me.
Thank you so much. Such an informative presentation, and we've heard about the loopholes, and now we've heard about some of the ways that those can be addressed. So important. We're going to just move swiftly on because I'm aware we have a number of speakers tonight, and I want to give them all time. Next is Allison Skipper. Allison is a vet with 30 years of practical experience in grassroots pedigree dog health work. She's currently finishing a PhD in the history of health and disease in pedigree dog breeding at King's College London. Well done, Allison. She's funded by the Wellcome Trust, and her research aims to learn from the past to develop better ways of working together for pedigree dog health in the future. So over to Allison. I think you're on mute, Alison. Sorry, Alison, you're still mute.
What rookie error that was. Embarrassing in front of hundreds of people. Right.
No, your picture just looks like my little dog as well, and he's in front of the fire and he won't move, but maybe he'll come up later. So carry on now.
Sorry about that, everybody. So this is Fred Taylor. back in 1900, Fred was a wealthy young man. He lived in Sunderland and his family was very wealthy coal exporters. And Fred, I think if he'd been around now, he'd probably have been a social media influencer, because you can see in the picture on the right, he rather fancied himself. He had a car back in 1900, that was quite a thing. And he bred and showed bulldogs, which were also very fashionable in 1900. Now, dog shows were also very fashionable then, more fashionable and popular than they are now. And so Fred showed his bulldogs. He spent a lot of money on his show bulldogs, tens of thousands of pounds in today's terms. And like other people at that time, he would often send his bulldogs by train to shows in other parts of the country. He would load them up in boxes like this, put them on the train in Sunderland, and then someone would collect them from the other end. And one day in June 1900, he put 3 bulldogs, 3 prize-winning bulldogs, on a train in Sunderland, and his agent collected them at King's Cross. These 3 dogs. And all 3 of them were dead in their boxes when they were collected. Now, some of you, when I said that, may have thought of stories like this, which have been in the news a lot lately. This was a story from June 2020, exactly 120 years after Fred's tragedy. And in this incident, 500 French bulldogs were sent on a plane from the Ukraine to Canada, and 38 of them were tragically dead on arrival. In both situations, these dogs were in poorly ventilated boxes on a long journey. They overheated, and being brachycephalic, flat-faced dogs, they couldn't cope with the heat and they died. Now, these 2 stories show us straight away that brachycephalic problems are not new. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to say that they're not simple either. So there are 3 big factors that play into brachycephalic problems, I think. First of all, of course, their appearance. That's why we like them. People find their appearance appealing. They like the flat faces, they like the big eyes, the cuddliness. It's often described as the cuteness factor. We find these dogs appealing on a really deep level. But the biology that goes with this appearance very often can be problematic. Sometimes they can't breathe properly. Sometimes they have problems with their spines or problems reproducing, problems with their skin or their eyes. And yet there's a huge commercial demand for these dogs. They cost a lot of money. We like objects themed around them. More people breed them because of that. And that feeds into this vicious circle, or vicious triangle in this case, with each factor feeding into the next in a complex way. People often speak as if these were new problems associated with the 20th century and the show ring, but actually they've been going on a lot longer than that. So right back in the 18th century, pugs were really popular and fashionable in high society. Aristocratic women like this one kept them as pets, and we know from commentary at the time that they often spoke of them and treated them as if they were toys or babies. Even back then, they had quite shortened faces. You can see this pug's tongue is sticking out, and its ears have been cut off, which was commonplace at the time, which again emphasises that rounded head. And there was a whole industry around pug porcelain as well. So just like we do now, they had novelty objects like this walking stick handle. And you see how in the statuette on the left, the pug's features have been exaggerated for comic effect, just like we do in objects today. So the commercialism and the cuteness factor around brachycephalic dogs have been an issue for a really long time. Concerns about their health have been going on for a long time as well. And those actually surfaced for the first time seriously, as far as I know, in the bulldog community in 1900. So bulldog breeders in around 1900 knew very well that they had changed the bulldog considerably from 40 years before, as you see in these pictures. And some of them were really worried about that because they knew that the new style dogs, which had shorter faces, shorter tails, more curved spines, as you can see, often had health problems. Like Fred's dogs, sometimes they died in the heat and they had trouble giving birth, they had shorter lifespans, and they were really concerned about this. They debated with each other what they should do. But the dog on the right was exported to America for £1,000. That's £116,000 in today's money. No wonder they bred them, and no wonder that type became more popular than the original type. It wasn't until 1962 that vets actually really became involved, and they came on the scene in quite a forceful way through a big publicity campaign which went to national media. It was all over radio and television. It wasn't just attacking brachycephalic breeds, it was much broader, concerned with breed-related disease more generally. But one of these vets in particular really didn't mince his words, as you can see from these quotes. He was very antagonistic, and he achieved a great deal of publicity, but very little health benefit, because the breeders were annoyed, they were very upset, and basically they didn't engage with him productively. So nothing really came of the brachycephalic element of this campaign. Fast forward to now, and arguably things are even more of a mess than they've ever been before, like this slide. The show side of things has become less important because all these other things have become so much greater. Influencers, social media, enormous numbers of people breeding irresponsibly, you know the story. So what can history teach us about what to do going forwards? I think, first of all, it's really important to take on board that this is not a simple problem. We can't ignore the power of cuteness and commerce. Something that's been going on for 250 years is not going to go away just like that, not even if we want it to. Those of you in this audience who are breeders, you're shaping your breed's future. Think about the discussions that those bulldog breeders had back in 1900. They were worried what legacy they would leave. We now know what legacy they left. What legacy are we going to leave for the future now? If you're not a breeder, I think it's really important to remember that breeders do the breeding. Those of us who aren't breeding these dogs, it doesn't matter on one level whether we're experts or how strong our views are, because we're only going to make a difference to the next generation of dogs if we can influence the actions of the breeders. Which is why I feel that polarization, although understandable often, is a really big problem. You see from the example in the 1960s that it doesn't always have a very effective outcome because it antagonizes people and then they won't engage. There have been standoffs between vets and breeders for a very long time, but arguably, as with so many other dichotomies, it's much worse than it's ever been because of social media, because of the silos and the echo chambers that form, when what we actually need to do is to talk to people who think differently from us, not the same. You're never going to talk to all breeders, of course. There is a huge element of breeders who are breeding for money or in very bad circumstances, or that you can't get hold of because they're in underground networks or whatever else. And probably most brachycephalic dogs are bred in conditions or with motivations that we would not at all favour. But there are some, probably about 1 in 10 roughly, are bred by breed enthusiasts who are in networks that can be engaged with. They belong to clubs or are otherwise part of communities. And this is why I think that people like this lady are really important. This is Vicky Collins-Natraz, who is the Kennel Club Bulldog Breed Health Coordinator, and I think is in the audience. So Vicky is a bulldog breeder who's trying to breed healthier bulldogs, and she's trying to encourage other people to breed healthier bulldogs too. People like her are really important because being part of these communities, they can help to shift breed culture. They can, for example, encourage other breeders to test their dogs for better health using schemes like the Kennel Club Cambridge Respiratory Function Grading Scheme, which aims to give breeders a tool to breed from dogs with better health going forwards. And they can be involved in collaborative networks like the Brachiocephalic Working Group, which gets the stakeholders together to talk across boundaries to try to improve health for these dogs from whatever route is possible. But you don't have to be in one of these networks to do this. We can all do it. We can take it to social media. We can all in our different ways contribute to this. And I profoundly think that everybody here today is going to learn something. And if we can all just reach across to other people who think differently and discuss things in an open way, then we will make progress for the dogs, which, as Carol said, is why we're all here. So do I think we can solve these problems? No, I think that's too tall an order. Do I think we can improve them? Yeah, absolutely, I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison, and that was fascinating indeed. Good luck as well with your, you're finishing your PhD, so that's wonderful. We're going to move on to Dan O'Neill. Dan graduated from Dublin Vet School in 1987. After 22 years in general practice, he moved to the Royal Veterinary College to develop the Vet Compass programme. As well as Senior Lecturer in Companion Animal Epidemiology at the RBC, Dan has authored over 90 papers since 2012, plus co-authoring books, Breed Predispositions to Disease in Dogs and Cats, and I know we have a cat in someone's lap tonight because I saw it in the chat, and Health and Welfare of Brachycephalic Flat-Faced Companion Animals too. Dan also chairs the UK Brachycephalic Working Group. So welcome, Dan, and thank you. Over to you. Okay, can't hear anything as yet. Oh, and the slides have gone now. Here we are.
How are we doing? Is that coming through now?
That's it, it's coming now, yay.
Ah, excellent,
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you, and thank you, Mark, for inviting me. And congratulations to everyone in the audience. You're humans, you're part of the human species. You're on the bus, you can control your own future. What I'm going to ask you tonight to reflect a little bit on those that are outside the bus, the dogs, the canine species, running dutifully behind the bus, but depending on us to determine their futures, where they're bred, how they're sold, and indeed what breeds they are. A little bit of a health warning here. You should be shocked by some of the content in this presentation, and Allison's and Rowena's and Tamsin's and Marianne's and Theresa's. So let's begin at the end. Oh yes, let's begin at the end. There's one key message I would like to get across to you tonight, and that is that it is all about humans. It is absolutely fine, in my opinion, to love brachycephalic dogs. Lots of people love them. 18% of UK dogs are brachycephalic. But just because we love brachycephalic dogs, we shouldn't consider that we need to own one. Loving is all about us. I think is one of the most selfish emotions there are. It's all about possession, acquisition, ownership, domination. When it comes to dogs, we should think about caring, which is about them, caring for the dogs, thinking about dogs. And it's our choices and our actions that define our love and our caring. So hopefully we will think more about caring about dogs. When we choose a dog, and I'm talking here to owners, and it's a message we can all share, we should think what the dog feels like, where it's been bred, how it's been bred, what breed is it, what life will it have, and then choose your breed and where you buy it and who you buy it from. I'm sure in the discussion later on, there'll be a lot of chat about who controls dog welfare. Well, in my opinion, it's owners are the real power brokers, not the kennel clubs and not the breeders and not the academia. But with that power comes great responsibility. Owners need to choose carefully. You should be shocked by some of this. And the real take-home message here is the brachy problem isn't a dog problem, it's a human problem. So let's begin at the real beginning. Confession. I have to say my biases. I have lots of biases. I care for dogs. I love dogs. But I love dogs, not the wrapping, not the outside. It's the character, the innate character. I'm a veterinary surgeon, an epidemiologist. I run Vet Compass at the RBC. I see the world from a disease and health point of view. Along with Rowena, we've started the brachycephalic research team at the RBC. I'm part of the UK Brachy Working Group, international collaboration for extreme conformation in dogs, dog breeding reform group, as Carl said earlier. I wrote a book 2 years ago on breed predispositions papers. We have a new book coming out this summer. The reason I show all of this is to say there is lots and lots and lots of work going on in brachycephalics. People who say there isn't enough being done, there is lots being done. It's just a really difficult problem, but we are making some progress. So tonight is all about the brachycephalic issue. So we should probably define that. What is it? Well, as Alison already said, it's complex. And there are lots of cogs in here. And similar to Allison, I see three main cogs. First of all, it's the conformation of these dogs, the construction of them. Then we have the health issues. And by learning about the health issues, we can make better evidence-based decision-making. And then finally, we have rising ownership, which is all a feature of consumerism and the commoditization of dogs. But the brachy issue is huge at the moment. All of these factors link together, and when you change one, you change another. But at the moment, given the crisis we're in, it's like a house that's on fire. we're not going to get out of this far by tinkering with the confirmation right now. As Allison said, we've been doing that for 250 years. Learning about the health problems again will help us, but it won't solve it immediately. It's rising ownership is the big area that we can impact right now to try and put out this fire. So let's look at these three issues slightly separately. So the confirmation issue, and these are bits I hope will come up in the discussion later on. A lot of these breeds, and there are lots of them, were selected originally working dogs. The short jaws gave them high bite strength, but they're now pets. They no longer need that. It's not a function they need. We could talk about breed standards. The breed standards define and describe what the dogs are, but maybe we need to reconsider what these are doing, and they should probably be describing how we evolve towards health rather than describing where we are right now. The Brachie Working Group has a consensus that we should not exaggerate these breeds any more than they currently are. The International Collaboration on Extreme Conformation is working on this from an international point of view. I would highly recommend anyone to look at the CFSG guidance on dog conformation. Gives some excellent advice and guidance on what dogs should look like. But I would also commend, exactly as Allison's already done, some of the excellent work that's already been done. Bulldogs at Crufts over the last decade have improved so much. A lot of that is down to breeders like Vicky, as Allison said. So the take-home message here is breeds always have evolved and they should continue to evolve, but it should be towards health, not appearance. The second cog I had was evidence-based. Now, I'm admittedly an epidemiologist. Everything I do is about data. And the work I do is within Vet Compass at the Royal Veterinary College. But just based on Vet Compass work alone, there is a volume of evidence on health issues in these dogs. 3 times the respiratory disease in brachy dogs. 19 times in pugs, the risk of corneal ulceration, a hugely painful eye condition. Dystocia, difficulty giving birth, 16 times higher in French bulldogs. Patelloluxation, 5 times higher. Heat stroke, 14 times higher. Skin fold dermatitis, 49 times higher in bulldogs. Cherry eye, where this little gland here in the eye comes out, 24 times higher in bulldogs. Dry eye, 38 times. Even anal sac disorders are 3 times higher. And obesity, something we can deal with during an animal's life, 3 times higher in pugs. Obesity is such an important condition that the Brachie Working Group issued a consensus statement on it. You should be shocked by some of the content here. There are significant issues. We can deal with it, but the immediate fire needs to be put out by reducing the populations of these dogs. So the final one, rising ownership, consumerism. The Brachie Working Group is so concerned about this, we released a consensus statement on it, describing the welfare impacts from sudden and large increases. These cover issues about breeding in certain parts of the world, poor quality breeding, selling on the poor quality. But is it true? What's the evidence? Well, again, and this is even up to 2013 quite old, we've significant evidence that these populations are rising hugely. Pugs rose from 1% to 2.8% even by 2013. Bulldogs are rising. French bulldogs especially are rising. And if I continue this up to the present date, these will be rising exponentially. There are huge population issues here. You should be shocked by this. But when Rowena and I decided on the topic of today, welfare problems, can we ever solve them? We should be putting forward some potential solutions. Ownership is often triggered by inadvertent or subliminal advertising. Mark already described some of this at the start of today's meeting using a newspaper where there are just random articles using pugs and French bulldogs that have just no need to be in those adverts. The Brachie Working Group has put out a position saying that advertisers, media, social media, celebrities, Instagram should not use images of brachycephalic dogs in their media, in their post. Please spread the word and ask media, advertisers, personalities to stop doing this. It is just advertising these breeds and promoting their ownership. We can also empower owners and actively dissuade them. The Brachie Working Group has put together a strapline, stop and think before buying a flat-faced dog. This is our gift to the world, to anyone who's interested in dog welfare. Please use this message to provide the core call to action to anyone that you're speaking to, publicly or privately, to try and spread a message that we should be considering the purchase of these dogs before we purchase them. Consider whether it's right. And if people still decide to go ahead and follow good advice, the Kennel Club and the University of Cambridge have developed a respiratory function grading system. DEFRA has a pet phishing campaign that is brilliant, helping you to avoid buying from an unscrupulous breeder. And the Kennel Club Assured Breeder Scheme gives you a much better chance on buying a healthy dog from a good breeder, rather than just buying online. So we started this with a question: can we ever solve them? I'm similar to Allison. My answer is no. And I've been working in this area for 10 years since I left veterinary practice to do something in the animal welfare world. But along with Allison, I think we can mitigate some of these harms. We need to understand the brachy problem more and more. As I said, coming out this summer, we have this book with 20 chapters from experts all over the world who've contributed on every aspect of brachycephalic health. Allison has a chapter there, Rowena has a chapter, I have a chapter. So the more we understand our enemy, as in bad welfare, the more we can deal with it. We can stop exaggerating towards extremes. We can accept that these breeds evolve, but they must evolve towards health, and they must keep changing. They must not stay looking as they are if they're currently in poor health. The respiratory function grading system offers hope. BOAS surgery consensus has just been released by Brachy Working Group. Obesity, we can encourage owners of especially breeds like pugs to make sure they stay slim. Puppies should be bought using a puppy contract. We should avoid using imagery of dogs with brachycephaly. And finally, our gift to the world: please, please, please use this message to badge your core call to action in any of your media and any of your messages. You should be shocked by some of this. If you're not shocked, you should be. Think more about it. And finally, I would ask you just to reflect on these dogs. Would you want to be the dog? Would you want to live your life as that dog, be bred as that dog, live your life with that confirmation? That's our aim. If you would, we have achieved good welfare. A lot of the information I gave here was referenced. I put some references here, and I hope in the discussion afterwards, we will really get into the nitty-gritty of this problem. Thank you very much.
Dan, thank you. That's been amazing. And actually, I'm just thinking about, my dog was from rescue centre, but I'm just wondering about his life before that, and you know, some of the issues that have been raised tonight, which are concerning for, you know, just ordinary members of the public who want to help and support dogs, just as our family have. So thank you. We're learning, and we're always learning at APDAWG, and I think that's what's amazing about this particular group. Next, we're moving on to Rowena Packer, Dr. Rowena Packer, lecturer in companion animal behaviour and welfare science, as well as a biotechnology and biological sciences Research Council Future Leader Research Fellow at the Royal Veterinary College. Rowena leads a research team exploring broad issues within the field of canine welfare, including the impact of disease on behaviour, welfare and cognition, plus understanding human behaviours that negatively impact canine welfare. Rowena has authored over 60 papers on canine health and welfare since 2012. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening, Rowena.
Thanks, Lisa. No, it's a pleasure to be here, and there's some cracking people speaking tonight and a great audience. So I'm really pleased to spend my evening doing this, not least because I got out of baby's bedtime. So thanks again. My 10 minutes tonight is going to be spent focusing on the human side of brachycephalic welfare and the barriers to change that humans themselves put in place that inhibit some of the changes that many of us in this room would like to see for these dogs. So the key issue I'm going to focus on tonight is the desire to own brachycephalic dogs. There's many human stakeholder groups that are involved in brachycephalic welfare, but as Dan has already alluded to, owners hold a huge amount of power in which breeds are bought, the pressures that are placed on breeders by their buying behaviour. So, for example, whether health tests are demanded as a requirement of a breeder or not, whether the brachycephalic boom can continue and or can be quashed somewhat will be largely down to the actions of owners in the absence of any UK legislation to prohibit breeding if that was desirable. Like Dan, I started studying brachycephalic dogs back in 2009, and have moved further and further away from looking at the actual dogs themselves and more towards understanding the minds of owners. So I'm going to be sharing more of these data with you tonight. So again, like Dan, just stirring things up, sorry, I'm going to be making 5 statements regarding human barriers to brachycephalic welfare that do come with a warning in that they're probably quite controversial, will likely annoy some people in the audience tonight, but vitally have a growing evidence base behind them. When I refer to people or owners, it is of course with the caveat that brachycephalic owners are a really heterogeneous group. There will always be variation in opinion and exceptions to rules, but the concerning trends that I'll be describing appear to be quite widespread, and indeed international data from other research groups is indicating that this isn't just an issue with some UK-based owners. So firstly, the statement that people want brachycephalic dogs because of their appearance. Secondly, owners of brachycephalic dogs normalise poor health. Thirdly, owners of brachycephalic dogs recommend their breed based on elements of their poor health. Fourthly, owners of brachycephalic dogs are extremely bonded to their dogs. And then finally, owners of brachycephalic dogs are addicted to their breed. So I'm going to explore some of the data around this to see how much you agree with these statements or not. So to start with, I've just said I wanted to get away from my baby, but I'm going to get you looking at babies. So look at these babies just to start with and rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. Start with how cute you think they are. And then secondly, and importantly, how much you think you might want to look after them. So I'll let you have a moment. And then secondly, if you could do the same, but for the babies on the right. So if you feel any differently in terms of their cuteness and how much you want to give them a squish. So this exercise on a larger scale was carried out on a group of college students in the USA who rated the babies on the right as being cuter, but crucially, they also wanted to look after them more. And as you can see, these are the same baby, but they've been digitally manipulated. So the baby on the right is more closely following what was alluded to earlier by Allison, known as the baby schema. So what is this to start with? The baby schema is a set of features that are thought to trigger the cute response within us as humans and motivate caregiving towards that individual. Elements of this schema include their large round eyes, a relatively large head and a round face, and a cute little button nose. Selection for these traits in dogs is thought to cause a bit of an evolutionary spillover effect where we inherently find some dogs that fit this schema as cuter and we want to care for them more. The schema is seen in infants of many species. So as we can see here, it's not just mammalian species, we even see it in birds. And I think there's some evidence now from some reptile species, but it's then lost in adulthood once we don't need a caregiver. And as we know with brachycephalic dogs, their puppies, like this picture here, they do start off as brachycephalic, but they don't grow out of this baby-like conformation and retain these features into adulthood. So to study whether appearance drives an owner's motivation towards a certain breed, a few years back now, I carried out a study which explored how much different factors influenced an owner's choice of their breed, comparing owners from the top 10 most popular breeds in the UK, 3 of which you can see on the right are brachycephalic, and the 3 that we focus on quite heavily within research. Owners of the brachycephalic breeds rated appearance as the #1 influence on breed choice, which I was quite surprised at. We know when we do surveys, we often get social desirability, so people telling us what they think we might want to hear, but it was rated as #1 above many other traits that I'll discuss in a moment. Another important trait that we saw in this breed was the size of the breed being suited to their owner's lifestyle. And these factors significantly differed from the influences upon the acquisition of non-brachycephalic breeds, so those 7 other popular breeds, whose owners instead prioritise breed traits such as perceived health and a longer life expectancy. So firstly, one of our challenges here is when we try and encourage owners to try and buy or indeed breeders to breed longer muzzled dogs, we might be reducing the cute factor of these individuals. And in some of my older work on conformational risk factors for BOAS, I'd previously questioned how flat is too flat. So where does the risk of BOAS arise? However, for determining how moderate a conformation needs to be for an owner to accept it, we might need to flip that to how flat is flat enough. And perhaps that those moderate shapes that we've been advocating for the best part of a decade now aren't having the same positive effect on would-be owners. Another element of appearance which is important to consider is that appearance also contributes to the construct of what we might consider a status dog. And I'm sure when you hear that phrase, it likely evokes an image of a stereotypically aggressive looking breed, not aggressive itself. And indeed, some of these breeds are largely banned, but status can mean more than this. And it can be framed as dogs that bring attention to their owners and portray a particular desirable image that they wish. Waves of status dogs have included the Teacup Dog Phenomena. I recently mentioned Paris Hilton and Teacup Dogs to some of our undergrads, and they didn't understand who she was. So that was pretty concerning and made me feel quite old. So this image of being a young, fashionable woman. And I think in the last 10 years, we've seen the brachycephalic dog become a status dog in terms of being associated with high profile celebrities and just a fashionable status. So ownership of brachycephalic breeds has also been considered extrinsically motivated ownership. So this is where owners acquire a dog as a means of obtaining this status due to some element of distinctiveness of their dogs. The importance of distinctiveness might explain why other extreme dogs, in terms of conformation, so for example, the Dachshund have recently gained popularity. Proposing to such owners to buy a more moderate breed, so what they might consider a more boring looking breed that won't garner the same attention when they go for a walk in the park or indeed on their Instagrams, might not be as effective as is likely being reflected right now in the huge surge in breeds that have conformational traits of concern. So my second statement was that owners of brachycephalic dogs normalise poor health. So in 2 studies that I've carried out in the past 10 years, I've consistently found that around half of all owners of brachycephalic dogs who exhibit clinically relevant signs of airway disease don't perceive that their dog has a breathing problem. So we initially showed this almost a decade ago now in a study where owners reported how often their dogs showed signs of breathing difficulty. They reported what their dog's breathing sounded like. And later on, they were asked whether their dog had a history of breathing problems. And we were surprised back then to see that over half of owners whose dogs regularly showed signs such as almost continuous snoring, snorting and wheezing, or showed difficulty when they were just pottering around the house with their breathing, didn't consider that their dog had a problem. And some of the spontaneous owner comments that were offered there included those that we can see here, where it seems that the pathological traits that we're worried about today are instead described as if they're a feature of the breed and playing into this phenomenon of normal for the breed. In a more recent study, I also explored owners' perceptions of their dog's health, both as an individual, but then also relative to the rest of their breed. As you can see from this graph and this data, this was a relatively young population of around 2-year-old dogs of the 3 breeds we've discussed earlier, whose owners largely described them as being in either very good health or in the best health possible. But then when we consider these subjective ratings against more objective data on diagnosis and treatment of disease, we can see there's a really high prevalence of disorders in this population, including around a quarter with allergies, corneal ulcers, skin fold infections, and BOAS, as Dan has just mentioned with the Vet Compass data. In addition, 1 in 5 of these dogs had already undergone at least 1 conformation altering surgery, including soft palate resection or nostril widening. So we're seeing a bit of a disparity between how healthy these owners think their dogs are versus what it might say on their veterinary notes. Owners also perceive their own dog's health when compared with the rest of their breed, revealed some more concerning trends towards an overestimation of their individual dog's health relative to others. So across all 3 breeds here, owners most commonly reported that their dog was healthier than average for the breed. And when all dogs were considered together, less than 7% of owners considered that their dog was less or much less healthy than average for the breed. And obviously we know with averages that that cannot be the case. And it's possible this is some kind of deflection phenomena where it might be driven by cognitive dissonance, which talked a lot around brachycephalic dog ownership, where owners might be aware of health problems in their dog's breed more widely, but find accepting these issues within their own dog as psychologically uncomfortable, instead potentially deflecting the issue to other individuals. And I think we can probably discuss this tonight, but we often see a lot of scapegoating of other groups within the breed are the ones that have the problem. These skewed perceptions could act as a barrier to owners both seeking treatment for their individual dogs, but also not put them off owning that breed again, or indeed placing pressure on breeders to breed for healthier individuals. Thirdly, unfortunately, evidence also now suggests that some owners of brachycephalic dogs recommend their breed based on some elements of poor health. So in a qualitative study of looking at which traits owners of current brachycephalic dogs would recommend their breed based on, the perception that the breed was suited to a sedentary lifestyle with limited space was one of the key areas of recommendation. When we look at some of the owner comments that made up this theme, we can see that some owners portray their dog as being lazy, and they see this as a positive trait because, for example, it doesn't mean they have to exercise them much. They're suited to a busy lifestyle with working people, people who don't like walking, or the elderly or disabled. And given from Cambridge's excellent research in the past few years, finding that around half of the 3 breeds that we investigated have clinically relevant airway disease, of which exercise intolerance is a core clinical sign, it's worrying that this potential sign of poor health is instead being commoditized and being considered instead an attractive feature for would-be owners. Fourth, we've now got some evidence that owners are extremely bonded to their brachycephalic dogs and that they may fulfill a childlike role for some owners. So in the same large-scale study of over 2,000 brachycephalic dog owners, we used an established tool to quantify the dog-owner relationship and found it was exceptionally strong when compared to other published studies that had used this same scale. And although this may be a positive for the dog and the owner if they have dog owner interactions that are fulfilling to both parties, it also potentially introduces some more barriers to change. So one barrier is the development of what we might call breed loyalty or an addiction to a particular type of dog. And in a follow-up study, we investigated whether owners would choose to own their current brachycephalic breed again, and a whopping 93% of owners said they would, with no difference in this level across the 3 breeds. The 2 factors we identified that were associated with an increased odds of this breed loyalty was being a first-time dog owner, which again might slightly reflect their lack of reference point or baseline for dog health, and also an increased level of emotional closeness and a reduced perception of the cost of ownership, as we just mentioned in the last slide. So trying to change hearts and minds of these individuals who are extremely close to their dog. They might consider them an almost human-like family member, who also consider their dog's personality and level of affection almost unique to their breed, as you can see in these couple of quotes, but who can't then recognise the inherent health issues with their breed or their individual dog. We clearly have a pretty big challenge on our hands here. So to finish and just to revisit our statements, we've clearly got some pretty major human barriers to changing the desire to both acquire and reacquire brachycephalic dogs. Our messaging surrounding the promotion of less extreme types or healthier individuals within breeds may have been unsuccessful in the past due to some of both the biological and the perceptual barriers that I've just discussed here tonight. And indeed, some of the same barriers may have deepened the divisions between some of the groups that are present and that Alison alluded to in her talk. And understanding where we go from here, I think we should start to take these data into account. If we can't trust people to do the right thing to improve brachycephalic welfare, and both in breeding and buying decisions prioritise health and welfare above their appearance, then do we need legislation to protect them instead? If we don't want legislation to control breeding and buying, then how can we use smarter messaging to try and change hearts and minds? And these are clearly me giving questions rather than answers, which might be a bit of a cop-out, but hopefully the next 2 upcoming talks can also shine some light on potential strategies in each of these camps. So before I run over, thank you to all of the usual fab team of collaborators, funders and groups I've been involved in who've been influential in my thinking. And just to plug it again, Dan and I's book is out this July and is a fantastic resource, I think, for bringing together so many different sources of information on this extremely wicked problem. So thank you to all for listening.
Thank you so much, Rowena, and that was fascinating and shows, you know, just how superficial in many ways humans are in relation to even our pets, and I think social media and, you know, many of the issues that influence us nowadays and future generations are going to be crucial in addressing many of these issues. So next we move on to Tamsin Furtado. Tamsin is a social scientist with a background in global health, a specific interest in the interconnections between human and animal health and well-being. She completed a PhD at the University of Liverpool, studying how we can improve the management of obesity in horses particularly focusing on horse-human relationships and human behaviour change, and now works on projects covering a wide range of aspects of understanding human behaviour in order to improve companion animal welfare, and in using social sciences to find out more about how we can help people to change. So thank you and welcome to Tamsin. And I think it shows that, you know, we have such a variety of speakers. We've not stuck to dogs tonight. We've got audience members with cats, and now we have Tamsin, who also has a specialty in management of horses as well as companion animals. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there are some related brachy issues in horses as well, unfortunately, but not as big as they are in dogs. Yeah, so thank you so much for the introduction and for allowing me to be here. So I'm just sharing my screen. Can you see that now? Is that all working? Someone give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. So yeah, so thank you so much. So I'm Tamsin. I'm a researcher at the University of Liverpool, and I also work with a group called HBCA, Human Behaviour Change for Animals, who do lots of projects within what is my kind of speciality, I guess, which is looking at how we can apply the science of behaviour change for human behaviour change and human psychology to welfare issues with animals, whether those are related to companion animals, whether they're dogs, horses, or whatever. So to start off with, so how can we get people to change their behaviour? So the presentations so far have given such a lovely overview of how this issue is really really pervasive. It's got lots of different aspects to it. It's really quite complicated and hard to figure out. And often when I'm talking to people about issues like this, people say, oh, we need to educate people, or we need legislation, or you know, we just need this one thing. And so I'm going to be talking a bit about those sorts of approaches and how we can decide whether there is one thing that's going to work, or whether there are kind of multiple ways of bringing about different interventions that will help with an issue. So the first thing to say is that the science of behaviour change is often something people think they don't know anything about. But actually, we've all been involved in lots of times in our lives where we've changed our behaviour, or we've been with our partners, our family members, colleagues, and so on, when they've changed their behaviour. And usually, if you think about, I don't know, maybe at some point in your life, you did a couch to 5K, or became a vegetarian, or whatever it might be, chose your new dog breed. Probably those things didn't come about through someone imparting information for you. They may have done. And it's really interesting because we've all had these lots of experiences through our lives where change has happened in our lives as a result of something. Sometimes it's triggered by information, sometimes it's triggered by something our friends doing, sometimes it's triggered by the environment around us. And by reflecting on that, we can work out how to change issues in animal welfare by applying the science that happens for us people. So, oh, sorry, my slides are playing up. There we go. So just to start off with, just think, when did you last change your mind about something? And what made you do that? When did you last change your behaviour? And what was it that led you to do that? So in thinking about this, I'm just going to give a really simple analogy. It's very oversimplified, but it's a really helpful way for thinking about behaviour change for different kind of different projects, different issues like this issue of brachy dogs. And this is the analogy of the elephant and the rider. So ignore the animal welfare issue present in the analogy. It just works really well. Just overlook that. Bear with me. And so what this analogy suggests is that we have part of our mind, the part that we often think of when we think, right, we need to educate people, is the rider. And the rider on this elephant is human. They're rational. They like logic. They can make informed decisions based on the information given to them. They can plan ahead and so on. And so the rider can kind of think, right, okay, I'm going to make this evidence-based decision. But as you can see, the rider is not on the floor. They're sitting on an elephant. So they're not going to be able to do anything without making that elephant do something first. Now, the elephant is your emotional mind. So the elephant is driven by your emotions, by your habits, by your unconscious biases, and all those kind of processes that we don't really think about so overtly as we do with logic. So the sorts of things Rowena was just talking about in terms of those really deep feelings about what's cute, for example, would be very much elephant things, and those deep feelings about passion for a particular breed, for example, would all be elephant things. So the rider, in order to do anything, to change anything, the rider is going to have to move this elephant, the elephant of emotions. And being animal welfare people, you probably will all be aware that generally the most successful way of making change to any emotional being is to use kind of positive reinforcement rather than usually punishment based and so on. I'm coming back to that. So you've got the rational mind, which is situated on this big emotional being, and is going to have to do something to influence this emotional being in order to make change. And those two are situated on a path. And the path is, as the text come up to you, yes, sorry, the path is your physical and social environments and the things around us. So, you know, the rational mind might not have to do anything if something on the path is making it so cute. So like, here's an example. When you go in a shop, you might not rationally think you need a chocolate bar, but the physical environment of the shop has placed the chocolate bar by the you know, by the tills, and your emotional mind, you know, the part of you that's like a bit tired after work, needs that sugar kick, is going to be driven by seeing the chocolate bar and thinking, yeah, I need that sugar kick, that emotional side. So you're probably going to bypass the rider and the logical part, and you buy the chocolate bar. Conversely, you might have the situation where, like a friend of mine has just done the first week of Couch to 5K. So his rational mind for months and months has been saying, I'm going to do Couch to 5K, I'm going to start running. I know it will be healthy if I start running. I'm going to download this app, blah, blah, blah. You know, all the kind of rational plans around doing that. But he's found it really hard to motivate the elephant and get the right kind of path in order to perform the behavior. So to you know, to build the emotional kind of wanting to actually do that exercise, getting a positive connotation with exercise, for example, finding places which are going to make it nice to exercise, that are going to fit in with lunch break, you know, all those things that actually sound silly but actually hugely influence the sorts of things that we actually do. So if we want to change behaviour, what we need to do is to direct the rider. So ideally get on board in some way with that rational decision-making mind, the logic and so on. We can also aim for the elephant. So we can aim to work with the person's kind of emotions and so on. Or we can shape the path, shape the environment around them. So if you're working with the rider, so that's the logical mind and so on, that's things like when we do education with people and we encourage them to you know, think differently about something. And that can work really well if the problem is related to a lack of knowledge. And as we've seen with brachydogs, some of that problem is related to a lack of knowledge. So yeah, definitely there is a place for some education. However, we can also see from the previous presentations that there is a huge problem with the emotional side of those kind of elephant things. So the unconscious feelings about what's cute, the emotional, you know, drivers of being attached to a you know, being attached to a breed, for example, and those kind of things, and those are much harder to overcome. And we can also shape the path. So that's the sort of things like, for example, legislation, and you know, not advertising on Facebook, those sorts of things. So I thought I would just run through a couple of examples of the different types of, again, really simplified, but types of messages that would relate to different areas of this kind of elephant rider model of behavior change. So you can kind of think about how this might apply and different approaches that we can use in order to kind of affect people in relation to their brachydogs. So if we sent the message, brachydogs cost a lot more to keep and they have the potential for more vet bills. Now that's clearly a logical argument, so that's going to affect the rider. So that's fine, you're affecting the rider, you're giving them some information, but don't forget that the rider is sitting on this massive elephant that already has very strong beliefs that the brachydogs are really cute and, you know, probably my dog will actually be okay, so on and so on. If we said brachydogs spend their lives suffering, that's an emotional argument, so that's appealing to the elephant. But if you remember at the start when we said about how, you know, when we're animal training, we know that positive reinforcement works much better than encouraging something to feel negative, and negative reinforcement, punishments and so on. And that's exactly the same with us humans. So an emotional argument that plays on making someone feel good about themselves works much, much better than emotional arguments that make people feel bad about something. And that's why in Rowena's presentation just before, we saw, you know, you often get kind of scapegoating of, oh well, my one's okay, it's the other breeds that are the issue and so on. if you said something like crossing the brachy breed with another breed means that they're still super cute, but they can live for longer and have fuller lives, then you're kind of crossing over between the rider and the elephant. So that's a more positive argument, which is affecting both at the same time, I guess. You're still going with the cuteness, but you're also having like a logical argument. So I would say that's kind of more likely broad spectrum to be mildly more successful. You can also, oh, sorry, my screen's in the way of this. We can also make it, we can change the path to make it more difficult for people to breed or buy brachy dogs. So things like changing on Facebook, for example, legislation around around puppy, you know, where people can sell them, around who can breed them, and so on. We can also, oh, sorry, my screen's not working very well. Sorry. Yeah, we can also showcase, so if we were going to showcase celebrities who have now made a decision to do something different, where previously they had another dog, you know, previously they had a Frenchie and now they've chosen to have a breed that has fewer health problems. So those sorts of things appeal to this, so those appeal to like our social norms, which is relates to our elephant side, our emotions, but also also the path, kind of, those actually act a lot more strongly than we often give them credit for. We can also do things like showcasing breeders who are breeding for better health and gold standard breeding. And those sorts of messages are quite kind of positively framed. So this is what we can do, this is what we can achieve, and so on. So tend to be quite successful, although it's hard to get people to kind of engage with what that means specifically for them. So another thing I just wanted to bring up was, in this issue, I think we talk a lot about what we don't want people to do, in terms of we don't want them to buy, you know, buy these dogs. We don't want them, you know, get them fat. We don't want people to buy puppy farm brachy dogs and so on. But we often don't, I don't feel like it's always very clear what behaviours we do want people to do. And this is the same with a lot of puppy buying behaviours, I think, with lots of projects around puppy buying generally, not just brachy breeds. So if we think about what behaviours we do want people to do, so do we want them to choose other breeds, full stop, never buy another brachy dog? Well, that's probably not going to happen. But if that was our aim, then, you know, that's going to need a completely different set of kind of arguments and a different set of interventions and so on to some other aims. And if that is the case, if that's what we're going to argue for, then what do we do about people who already have dogs that have, for example, quite poor breeding? What, or do we want people who are purchasing a brachy dog to get one from a breeder who is doing something to breed for better health? And if so, how do we help them to know who those people are? And I can only imagine if us tonight, with our 300 people in the audience, tried to decide who were the good breeders, we would have, I'm sure there would be quite a lot of discussion about who, you know, who would count as a good breeder, for example. It would be quite hard to identify who those people would be. So it's quite hard to tell people where to go and you know, what advice to follow in that. Do we want to encourage people to breed their dogs if they have, so if you were a vet and someone came in with a really, really lovely example of a Frenchie or a pug, do we actually want to be encouraging people to breed from those dogs so there are more of the dogs that have better health? Well, probably not. That's quite controversial, but it's an example of how you know, we don't really have necessarily clearly defined aims and goals. And you know, there are approaches like this which would kind of help to give kind of positive messages about what those dogs could be like. And what are the actions for the people who already have brachy dogs, particularly ones that have, for example, that need surgery, maybe? What do we want those owners to be telling other owners? What do we want them to be doing for their own dogs? And to kind of do to change the social norm around, for example, brachy dogs needing operations. Finally, do we just want to raise awareness, change people's hearts and minds? Well, maybe, and that could be the goal of some of these the interventions that we're doing, but just remember that raising awareness and changing hearts and minds isn't always changing behaviour. Those things can be quite separate. So it may well be the case that people do believe that, you know, generally speaking, brachy dogs are unhealthy, but that doesn't mean that they won't buy another one. So we need to be quite clear about whether we're changing their attitude or whether we actually want to change their behaviour, and if so, exactly what behaviour is it that we want to change. So There's been lots of work that's been done in this already, as we've already heard, but also I just thought it was worth saying as well that there are obviously lots of other related projects from related issues, which we might also be able to learn from. So, for example, the work on brachydogs in other countries, which we're going to hear about later, but also perhaps extreme phenotypes in other breeds. So German Shepherd would be a good example. What's being done about that? How successful is it? Are there lessons that we can learn for better or for worse? Are there other issues with animal aesthetics that we can look at? So for things like tail docking or ear cropping, for example, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what can we learn from it to apply to the kind of aesthetic aspect of the brachydog issue? And what about other things about impulse purchasing, which we know is an issue with the brachydogs? So are there, there are projects, for example, on impulse purchasing of exotic animals, for example, or other puppies generally, and are there things that we can learn for the brachydogs from that? So in terms of the question, welfare problems in brachydogs, can we solve them? I would say, well, it depends what we want to solve.
If that's okay.
Perfect, because I've got about 30 seconds left. Amazing, thank you. So it depends exactly what problem we want to solve. So first, we do need to outline that, and it's not that there's one problem that all of us would want to solve, it's that there are lots of kind of different micro problems within this, some which will suit some groups to solve and others which will suit other groups. But as we've been hearing, there are lots of groups already working on this, working on those different areas. Some will be working on the rider, some will be working on the elephant, and some on the path. So my take-home messages are basically, so we should, I move away from arguing with the rider. I don't mean that it's fine to give information to the rider and educate the rider, but what I really want to say is that this is a kind of wider problem than just thinking about the education and the rider, because actually the working with the elephant of the issue, the emotions and so on, and the path can be really helpful with issues like this. And also to be clear on what behaviours we actually want to encourage. What do we want people to do? Because if we focus on that, then it's much easier to be clear about how we can move forward. So thank you very much. Please feel free to contact me on Twitter or whatever. And yeah, look forward to chatting with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that was fascinating. And I think it shows just how complex it is to change behaviours, but that there's different strands that we should be working towards, and certainly through shaping the path legislatively is one way that this group can help to move things forward. Our next speaker is Marjan van Hagen. Dr. van Hagen works in the Department of Population Health Sciences, Unit Animal Science and Society at the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine in Utrecht. I've actually been to Utrecht, it's beautiful. Marjan contributed in various Netherlands organisations to develop policies to promote the health and welfare of animals. Welcome to Marjan.
Well, thank you for this introduction. I'm very honored to be here tonight and to talk to you about solutions for welfare problems, and especially the question tonight, the welfare problems of flat-faced dogs. Can we ever solve them? And I must say, in short, the answer in the Netherlands is yes, we can, because morphological variation of the skull is due to breed selection. And we created these dogs with a malformed skull, and so we can change them backwards into well-formed skulls again. How can we do that? I think we already shared some thoughts about that, and also in the Netherlands, we see that it's a joint effort, it's a team effort. Breeders are breeding, as was mentioned before, and they can select for the sire dams in favor of less extreme flat-face phenotypes. And I put on the willing breeders, and I will come back to that. And of course, veterinarians can help making the selection. Also, the experts, where I work from, also from the Center of Genetic Companion of Animals, and we made a program, Fit to Breed, helping breeders select against inbreeding and other things, moving forwards to the next generation of brachycephalic dogs with the lowest possible risk for flat-faced breed-related welfare problems. So you may think, well, that solved all the problems. I'm sorry to say no. So then why aren't the problems solved yet if it's such an easy task to do and make the right choices? Well, we heard about that in the prior presentations, and I just put it into short that maybe not everybody's willing to make the effort to do this. And of course, it's also a combination. People still select in favor of extreme phenotypes. I also saw a lot of people in the chat saying, well, I've got these very well examples. Unfortunately, in the Netherlands, I don't see very many of them. Also, the veterinarians are still working on cesareans and surgical corrections. And of course, as we heard, a lot of people buy these dogs, and evidently they choose the extreme phenotypes, and maybe they're not willing to make another choice. So there are a lot of efforts made, but as we don't make very much progress, in the Netherlands, we said, well, if they're not willing to do to make the effort, let's make it mandatory. And also in the Netherlands, we had some changes in law. There's a lot of text. I'll just keep it short because the main act is in 2014, the Animal Keepers Degree Act. And what it says that it is forbidden to breed with pet animals in a way that the welfare and health of the parents of offspring is disadvantaged. And it says a lot of things, but important for this topic is that one should prevent, as far as possible, that serious hereditary abnormalities and diseases are transmitted to or may arise in the offspring, and also external characteristics that are injurious to animal welfare or health shall be transmitted to or may arise in the offspring. So that is put into law to make it mandatory that these are things breeders have to take into consideration. However, nothing's changed really. We all thought, well, now it's very clear and obvious what breeders have to do, but it still remains the same topics. And one of the things is that we had a law, but it was hard to enforce it. Because as you could read with me, what is serious hereditary problems? What are the external characteristics that are injurious? It's an open norms. There are just outlines, and the minister at that year was hoping that the industry or the sector would fill in the outline voluntarily. But they didn't. They just kept on doing their thing, and they thought, well, the law is there, nobody's looking at it. So they just kept on making the choices for more extreme phenotypes. And then we had this minister, and she was wondering, and also there was a lot of pressure in the Netherlands to do something about it. Now we have a law, why isn't it enforced? So she turned to the expertise center asking for help. Help me to enforce this law, what should be the norm? And we were looking into that, and it's a broad legislation. It's about cats, about dogs, all kinds of animals. And there are very many breed-related problems, not only with the brachycephalic we're having this topic on tonight. And we thought about, well, where do we start to help this minister? But we did think we have to start with a large group of dogs, so we can have the best interest for animal welfare in the shortest period for a lot of dogs. So we decided to look into these brachycephalic dogs to have this large group. But even then, there are a lot of problems to address. And to have all these kinds of what is a good norm and criteria for breeding, it was also very challenging. And as you see, you don't have to see the whole staircase just to take the first step. Well, we agreed. We have a large group of dogs from the brachycephalic, but also if we just start looking at the skull, that is very obvious a problem because due to the malformation of the skull, there's not enough room for the soft tissue, which leaves no space for the brain. The eyeballs pop out, the respiratory tract is compromised, and also the skin curls. So a lot of issues you can address just by changing the formation of the skull. So that is what we were going to try to do and have a norm for. So we had a lot of help of research all over the place, and I'm very happy to have this talk with some of them did research on this topic and that we could benefit from. And we just collected it and made an inventory of what was possible to use to assess the skull malformation. And it had to be addressed by the inspectors in the field. So like taking a CT scan of things that would not be possible, as things like the exercise walk, a lot of possibilities are very difficult to do in the field. Well, of course, we had a large advisory board to talk about these things, what's done in research, what was the possibilities, what are really important issues. And they were experts on ophthalmology, neurology, dermatology, reproduction, and ear, nose, and throat problems, all issues in the brachycephalic dogs. And this was already mentioned tonight in research looking at risks of measurements like the craniofacial ratio, and there were, because of the research, we had hard evidence of what the most important thing was to distinct this morphologically of the skull. So the next step, what we did, if we looked at dogs with a well-formed brachycephalic skull, what should they look like? And so this is the part with the criteria that goes with the skull formation. And, sorry, I have to go back on that. Where did I go? If we look at this, a well-formed brachycephalic skull in the dog, there should not be any abnormal breathing noise in the resting state, so no stridor. There should be open nostrils. The relative muscle shortness should be equal to or greater than 0.5 to have not a high risk for all the problems I mentioned before. And please be aware that if you have a wolf-like dog, the relative muscle shortness is 1:1. So it's very short already, that is half size. There should not be nasal fold present, as it's not, the skin should just have enough room to go over the nose. The eye white should not be exposed. And naturally, there has to be an eye reflex that the eyelids are closed fully. And believe me, there are dogs out there that is not able to do so. Well, of course, if we look into this criteria, most brachycephalic dogs in the world do not fit up with these criteria. And it was absolutely not the idea of the Netherlands to ban any breeds, any brachycephalic breeds. So we did have to do another check. So this is not the criteria we can use in the field and say this is the new deal by law. And therefore we came up with a traffic light model saying, well, this is the most ideal dog in the world that doesn't exist. We do have very extreme types and we made various categories saying that the red ones are off limit and the ones in orange, it would be much appreciated if the dogs that are now in red in this population would go to the orange way. I know it's a lot of lines, but you can read the report and check it out if you like to see it in more detail. But this is more the basics that we used. Because we had just had to see that the criteria in the field can be used by inspectors that are not our vets, but there are lots of information that breeders can take into account. So we did also add these possibilities to help breeders further if they want to check out more in choosing the best combination than just the skull formation criteria that is used in the field to enforce the law. We also supported the vets, helping them that what they can do to help breeders and check things out, to screen them and have DNA tests and all kinds of things that are out there that can help breeders to breed more healthy brachycephalic dogs. And our minister was very happy, I must say, that we made an effort for starters to benefit the welfare of dogs. And she posted a letter to the parliament informing them that there were some criteria out there now. They were endorsed and also enforced. There was already a pilot checking up on breeders and telling them that the criteria were not added up. and they should make a better effort to come to the orange zone for the next generation. And of course, it's just a start. And in the Netherlands, we also have a platform now. It's called Fair Dog. And we're going to look in other criteria, because it's not just the skull that has difficulties and welfare problems, and try to have criteria of that. And of course, it's not just related to brachycephalic breeds. We're also going to look to other breeds and ask the advisory board to help us to have more criteria and to have a benefit for the welfare of dogs all together with the team to make a more healthy population on all sorts. As I mentioned, in the genetic center, we also have a full program. It's the time is limited tonight, so I just keep it in short. But of course, as it's more difficult for breeders to make the right choices, there are a lot of programs out there to help them have a screening and make an effort to combine the best sire and dam combination. And we did start a lot of examples that's more cute or not cute. I think the most cute dog are the ones that are happy and are happy to spend their lives with us. And we have now outcross of other dogs. And this is just one generation of a pug. And I think you can see that the welfare problems can be so they can benefit from one generation just making another choice of the combination and get so much healthier. I think that's one thing that we should do as dog lovers and in love for our dogs, and to take care, I should say, as I learned tonight, to take care of our dogs to be more healthy and make the best choice as at the starting point to breed. So let's solve the welfare problems of the flat-faced dog, and I know we can do it. So please, let's start with it. And if you want to read the full report, there's the link below this slides. That was it in short for me, from a long process in the Netherlands. So if you ever want to ask me again more, then please find me on my email. I think I was on time.
Progressing these particular issues. I do realise my little dog's arrived, but also Ariana Williams has said that the cat's left the building now, so we're back to dogs. And the cat's left the APDAWG meeting, so they've had enough. So thank you so much to Marjan. Our final speaker of the evening before we move on to our discussion is Theresa Cargill, who bought her first Frenchie 10 years ago and was persuaded to dip a toe into the show ring. More followed as she became increasingly interested in the health issues of the breed, health tests available, and had a small number of litters from highly health tested parents before starting to help with rescued Frenchies. Discovering the health issues becoming more prominent led Theresa to much greater involvement with breed rescue, setting up charity Phoenix French Bulldog Rescue in 2017. She now devotes her life to the health and welfare of Frenchies and is keen to help make healthier changes to allow the breed to be loved and enjoyed for many more hundreds of years to come. So welcome, Theresa, and over to you.
Thank you. I've got the benefit of having seen everybody else's presentation first, so it's quite useful to see what I could leave out and what I continue with. As Lisa has just said, we've been in existence now since 2017, and we've certainly seen some massive changes in that time. We are an online rescue. We're a KC affiliated breed rescue. We're a member of the Association of Dog and Cats Homes. And you might expect me to come at the welfare of flat-faced dogs from an adopt, don't shop point of view, because we are a rescue. But in actual fact, we're not anti-breeding. We just want to see breeding done well and with only the very best specimens available. So Rowena talking about the good breeders is a really important part. And we do promote the good breeders, and if people come to us and say they want to have a puppy, that's their choice. Not everybody can take on a rescue dog, and so we will point them in the direction of those we know are actively involved with health testing. Next slide, please, Tiffany. So the role of breed rescue, the way we see it, we can run quite differently to the way in which premise-based rescue can run. We're online, and so we can have very constant contact with all of our dogs at the click of a button, which means we are available far more hours of the day, which is not always a good thing. But it does mean that we do say to the people that come to us that we will not judge their reasons for surrendering their dog. Everything is totally confidential. And that's quite useful because it means that breeders who are moving on their ex-breeding dogs, and whether you agree with that or not, if they are moving on those dogs so that they don't have so many in the house, you want to be sure that they are moved on safely and are going to be well protected and cared for. And so I, for one, would much rather that they came to us through rescue, and in a very confidential way, we will help to rehome them. We also see our role of rescue, of a breed rescue, very important that we help to inform the public about the breed and be really truthful about it. This is something where we do still find people are getting the wrong message. People still are reading, and the KC may need to look at this, Bill, that the KC still say that a flat or apartment and up to an hour exercise per day is okay for this small breed. This breed's actually more medium sized, and they do, when well bred, and we do see plenty of well bred ones, can cope and enjoy quite a reasonable level of exercise, and people are buying them and finding that they thought what they were going to get is this cute little dog that sits on the sofa and doesn't need much attention, and what they've actually found themselves with is something more akin to the Tasmanian devil. So that's something that definitely we try to get the word out there. People will come to us as well that are having problems with their dogs. They may have bought indiscriminately from breeders that are here today, gone tomorrow. I'll come on to that. And so we do try to help them to understand and to find ways to work with their dogs so that they can keep their dogs in their home. We would much rather we worked with somebody and then they said, oh, actually, we've changed our minds. We don't want to surrender our dog. And that's great. That's a win-win. So that's very important that we're there to offer that advice as well. And so throughout the time a dog is with us, we support our foster carers through online chats. But once the dog is adopted, we continue to do that. We check in with them, we see how things are going, and we have resources that we can put into place to support people if they're having any problems. Yes, I will mention celebrity endorsement. It hasn't been good for our breed. People have seen them on the arms of many an idol on the catwalk or on the red carpet, and what they may think they're buying into is this handbag dog that tucks under your arm, particularly as the breed is supposed to be in the ranges of 11 to 12.5 kilos. That's still pretty heavy to tuck under your arm. That's not a handbag dog, that's a shopping trolley dog. But more regularly, we're seeing 14 to 16 kilo dogs. You know, and that's not a small dog, that's quite hefty. Next slide, please, Tiffany. So what are the difficulties facing our breed in rescue? Well, most of the speakers this evening have talked about the increased numbers of dogs that are being bred to demand. And this is where I say about breeders versus what we in rescue call breeders. Your breeder is someone who is breeding their dogs, doing the very best for them. They are sometimes called hobby breeders, and I know that there's an association with that that's not always pleasant, but it shouldn't be. If they're taking care of their dogs and supporting them when they've gone to their new homes and taking care of the mothers and the fathers of the puppies that are making them their money, they shouldn't be judged any more harshly for it. But then we have what we call the greeders, and these are here today, gone tomorrow, mobile phone number that doesn't exist once you call it when you've collected your dog. You hand over a couple of £1,000 in a car park somewhere. You don't get to see mum, you don't get to see dad. It's exactly the sort of thing that Lucy's Law has been set up for, but they still exist. And they're all over the country. And so we have to try to inform people who want to buy a puppy which is which, and to do their homework. That's the most important thing. There is still an awful lack of public awareness regarding the characteristics and common health issues of the breed. But as some of the speakers have focused on the breed being very unhealthy because they're brachycephalic, I know stacks of people who are online this evening who are commenting in the chats, not all brackies are unhealthy. And that's a very important thing to bear in mind. If a dog is well bred, well health tested parents, there's no reason why it should make that snorting sound, because no, it is not typical of the breed. We've just been led to believe that. And so it's very important that we make people aware of these things, and we do that online. We do it if they call us, we do it at events, which obviously during lockdown hasn't gone brilliantly well, but hopefully it will pick up again later this year. So these are some of the common health issues, and people do need to be aware of that, but they do need to know that it's not a given. Touched on earlier today as well, I think by Jake, in actual fact, the misconstrued understanding of the licensing for breeders. That's something that probably needs to take a more prominent part when people are looking for what is the licensing, what does it mean? And it is particularly interesting with those selling for profit, because they only have to make £1,000 a year. That's not a lot in a litter of French bulldogs that are anything from 1,800 upwards. So that's quite interesting. And there was a question asked before this evening as well about puppy farms and why are they able to make money, and that nobody's doing anything with the tax situation. That's actually not true, because HMRC now do have a dedicated department, and people can go online and report if they think that somebody is breeding for profit and not declaring it. No regard for health testing or post-sale support by many breeders again comes back to these breeders. A decent breeder will always be at the end of the phone to support you with your dog. And so many people we speak to, we say to them, oh, did you get your dog from a breeder? Where did you get it from? Oh, I can't remember the breeder's name. Oh, I don't speak to them anymore. Oh, I don't know where they've gone. That's horrible. I have bred at one time. I've bred a few dogs myself. I would hate to think that I didn't have a relationship with my ongoing puppies. And I know most good breeders on here would agree with that. They are there for support. Then you've got the nature versus nurture. Now, I've got to tread a careful line here, because there's an awful lot to do with genetics in the French Bulldog world, and there's a lot of what is known as colour bashing. And there are some very healthy non-standard colour French Bulldogs that are born, and we do have some of them in rescue, quite a few in fact. But what you must consider more than anything is when you're buying the brachycephalic dog, yes, you need to know of the health issues as well, and you need to know what could have gone wrong and investigate that. But then you need to look at nurture as well. And this was, I think it might even have been Rowena. Was your dog well cared for? What sort of environments were they living in? And is that nurture being put into the puppy to help it become a well-rounded animal that you can take care of for the rest of its life? That leads very interestingly on to increasing cases of behavioural issues. These are becoming rife in rescue at the moment. And our monthly vet bills, when we show them, and you'll see them on the slide shortly, our monthly vet bills also include payments to behaviourists, because we are seeing a lot of people, and this goes back to the baby schema, which Tamsin spoke of, and the fact that they're cute, they're lovely. And one of the questions we ask when somebody's had a real problem with a dog with behaviour, needing to surrender it, have you babied that dog? Yes, invariably they have. We've got to unpick that. Next slide, please, Tiffany. So here's some of the reasons that Frenchies are actually surrendered to rescue. And other people who are listening this evening that work within rescue will have heard some of these, and some of them, or the less genuine reasons. I'm moving and I can't take the dog. Okay, good job they accept children. Or I'm having a new baby and I can't cope with both. Really? Okay, that's fine. Hope don't have two children and can't cope with the first. It has bitten my child. Some people, that's genuine. Sometimes that is genuine, as is having a new baby and can't cope with both. That might be genuine. But to say that it has bitten your child when it is, and we've had this as an incident, a 6-month-old puppy that's mouthed with incredibly needle-sharp teeth. by putting that dog into rescue and saying it's bitten my child, that could be a death sentence for that dog. You do not want to label a dog unnecessarily as aggressive. But they'll say things to make you take the dog because they don't want it anymore. Ex-breeding stock, not wanted anymore. Not always a bad thing to surrender to a reputable rescue. So I've kind of starred those ones because they could fit into more genuine reasons, and some very genuine reasons, particularly during COVID: relationship breakdown, change or loss of work, a dog with severe medical issues that they can't afford, can't cope with behaviour, maybe of the owner's making, may not be, or it's livelier than expected. They thought they could live in a flat with a little lap dog and they've got that Tasmanian devil. Next slide, please. There's a few stats here, just thought we'd throw them in for a bit of colour, because we're very often asked, and it is an assumption actually, that only old dogs come into rescue, particularly ex-breeding dogs. They assume them to be old. The standard age for an ex-breeder coming to us is 3 or 4. That's not an old dog in Frenchie terms. I have a 10-year-old here who still thinks she's a puppy. So you can see, if you look at the grey line, 2018 was where we peaked on quite a high number of dogs at all. But that grey line represents dogs 1 to 4 years old, and it's the highest number of age group that we take in. That's our normal age group. The over 4 years is quite low. I'd like to have seen that probably go up to 1 to 6 on the other, but our stats couldn't pull that off, sorry. But you can see as well, but we do get puppies. We do get puppies. And over the last 4 years, we've had 5 litters born in rescue, and all joyfully came through my home. But that's 5 pregnant dogs coming into us. Next slide, please, Tiffany. This puts it into a bit more perspective. So the dogs that come into annually, still using it by age there. You can see 2018 was a very busy year for us. And again, those middle-aged 1 to 4 years dogs right at the top of that. And it's the case every single year. Very young, very old, not really doing anything. And then you can see the dog movement. We thought it was interesting to map who comes in and who goes out. And you can see, I think as a typical one, 2018, we had more dogs obviously came in than actually were rehomed. And that kind of reflects those that stay with us, what I would call our sticky dogs. Those are the ones that have got behavioural or medical issues that will be in very long-term foster. Next slide, please, Tiffany. These are the common conditions that we see. These have been so spoken about by all our experts, so I'm really glad I didn't try to get technical or clever with these. These are just our dogs. These are the dogs that we've seen in a 1-year period. We just looked at that 1-year period. And you can see skin problems is right up there. I hate skin problems. They're so difficult to tackle. Cleft palate. We've had at least a dozen cleft palate puppies that have come into us, the majority of whom have been saved. Some have had surgery, some haven't. But Boas, there it is, our old friend Boas. That's the one that we probably spend most on in terms of vet fees trying to correct, although skin problems and ear problems can be brutal to us as well. Next slide, please, Tiffany. And here's what that cost. These are eye-watering figures. You would think 2020 might have resulted in quite a lot less being done. And yes, there is a significant drop. But when you look at the vet fees overall from 2019, you can see that there's an awful lot of cost involved in that. This is just mending the dogs that come to us so that they can go off to their forever homes in good order. Next slide, please. Who pays and how? Just as most breed rescue charities, or indeed any welfare charity, we are self-funding. We take our money from the adoption fees, which are fixed according to ages of dogs. Doesn't matter if it's a slight crossbreed, we'll take it if it's a pug cross Frenchie. We don't differentiate. As long as it's roughly Frenchie size, we have the audience for it. We do receive donations. Quite a lot of fundraisers are done by individuals when it's their birthday, or they decide that we've got a particularly big vet bill. We might have a campaign as well. Fundraising events, not last year, definitely not. Usually a really good way for us to raise our profile and make some additional funding, but that was completely cut last year. Just Giving and the Facebook, very good for raising money as well. PayPal, big fat no. recently got into trouble with them because a lot of very generous people were making donations to us and they were sending them as friends and family. PayPal didn't get their fee, so closed our account. Next slide, please. What needs to change for the good of all the brachycephalic breeds? We most definitely don't want to see breeding stopped. That really would be to throw the baby out with the bathwater. What we need to do is to be sure that the breeders are doing the right things by the dogs. There's so much health testing in our breed. Penny Rankin Parsons is online tonight, I know. She was instrumental in developing a health testing program for French Bulldogs in the UK. She is my go-to person for health. Recently been taken over by Vanessa Bryant, and it's an amazing thing. It's so easy to do. Everything is laid out. You've only got to go on the site. And if your dog's not up to all of those tests and doesn't tick all of those boxes, don't breed it. Yes, the breed standard does need revisiting, and the breed clubs need to be instrumental in helping that. Lucy's Law is very useful because it means that some of the less desirable breeders may be rooted out. We're seeing some evidence of that. Some of the breeders, I should say, are desperately trying to get rid of some of their stock that they've got in different homes all over the place at the moment, what they like to call co-own, and we're seeing quite a few of those come in various dribs and drabs. Kennel club registrations, this is always going to be a difficult point really, and I know Bill Lambert's online this evening, so I'll be kind, but when people get that green slip of paper that says their dog is a pedigree and they've got a 5-generation pedigree, they really think that that is the be all and end all for health and well-being and the purity of that dog they've bought. They might not see that the Kennel Club has written on their colour not recognised by Kennel Club, meaning that it might not have been well bred because somebody has not looked into nature or nurture. All of these things need addressing. Public awareness obviously being the highest one. Microchipping, this is still a huge problem, and we did touch on this with the last APDAWG meeting where about the national database for microchipping. It's one of my biggest bugbears. So many dogs of 4, 5, 6 years old, even younger, coming into us that are from breeders and have been genuinely rescued. Yes, they've got microchips, so that breeder feels that they've fulfilled the law. It's unregistered. It is totally unregistered. So there needs to be more accountability for checking these and ensuring that they are definitely registered. And yes, we would like to see heavier penalties for those who break licensing laws and keep their dogs in cruel conditions, etc. Next slide, please, Tiffany. And the last one, how can you help to improve the breed? Well, you're here already, APDAWG. Educate your friends, make sure they speak to people and read papers that are relevant to what they're wanting to do. Breeders are the only people who really can lobby the Kennel Club for any changes because they're the people on the ground working with the dogs and seeing what's going on. Yes, adopt, don't shop to some extent. I know not everybody can. I would love to see everybody going to rescue to have a French Bulldog where we've done our best to improve any health issues. That can't happen for everybody. So if you are going to buy puppies, do it really carefully. Ask lots of questions. Check Lucy's Law. Do your homework. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And that brings all of our speaking arrangements to a close for this evening. But we have over 55 Q&A to go through in the next half hour. So I'm going to hand over to Tiffany and Mark now for this part of this evening. And I just want to thank everybody for presentation. I might pop off for 10-15 minutes to get my kids into bed, but I'll be coming back before the end. So thank you so much. I didn't stick exactly to time. That's why I'm not going to be the Speaker in the House of Commons ever. But I'm not worried about that because I think it's been a fascinating evening and we've all learned so much, and it's been really enthralling to be here for this amount of time. So thank you to everyone. Over to Mark and to Tiffany for questions. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Lisa. Okay, I'm just blown away by the quality of the presentations tonight from absolutely everybody, both in the UK and abroad. Thank you, Marianne, live from from the Netherlands. I've been chatting with Tiffany behind the scenes, and we are obviously more than happy to go to 9:30, possibly to 10, because to have this level of experience in one place and so many questions would be a shame to waste these resources. So if everyone's cool with that, don't worry, it will be recorded so you can watch it back, and we're happy for you to put kids to bed, especially you, Lisa, and do what you need to do. But I think we're going to take advantage of this situation and make the most of it, and really do as much learning and making progress as possible. So over to Lisa. Just before I pass over to, Tiffany, my good friend and Cariad founder Linda Goodman has written a phenomenal blog on the use of brachycephalic dogs in advertising that only went live yesterday, and that can be found on the Cariad Twitter feed, and we retweeted it on APDAWG as well, so well worth sourcing that. So over to Tiffany, and maybe you could pick out some questions for our panelists.
All right, there we go. I muted myself. Thank you very much, Mark. And I echo exactly what Lisa has said and Mark has said. Fantastic presentations. And I've learned so much. And the chat is on fire. There's so much chatter. So it's definitely been really engaging. Thank you all. I'm very happy to select questions, but equally if any of you see a question that you would like to answer, please feel free to cut in and to answer as well. If you want to answer any via just replying to them, feel free to do that as well. So I will just start with the top question, and whoever wants to say anything about it and then pick another question, please feel free. It can just be very casual. So the first question from Anne, it says, "Dear all, I realize this is a group concentrating on dogs, but the brachy issue affects a range of species, including but not limited to cats, rabbits, horses. Do you think a simple change to the Welfare Act of 2006 to include offspring, or to clarify that they are included in that breeding for poor conformation or mental health, is not taking reasonable steps to prevent freedoms from illness, fear, and distress?" She goes on to say that we know that anxiety is inherited, and this is worsened by parenting. Does anybody want to begin this question?
I can, from a behaviour change perspective, if you like. Oh, sorry. I'll just go quickly and then hand over to you, Carol. Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, from a kind of behaviour change perspective, that kind of thing is a really interesting approach, because it sets a precedent and says what people think is this is acceptable, this is not acceptable, and so on. But the difficulty with that sort of thing is getting people on side who are already doing the behaviour and making them feel like they know how to change, what their what the desired behaviours actually are, and B, how you're going to police it, or what you're going to do about it, because there's no point having legislation if no one's kind of following up on it. And that's, I know, sometimes the case that people feel with, for example, puppy farms and so on, that like it's really hard to police these things. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting idea, and that's one example of how you can shape a path. Usually it doesn't solve an issue without a lot of other work as well, but yeah, it's a great example of something that could be done, like, you know, one layer of a kind of multi-pronged approach. That would be my view.
What was the question? I think it was about the law and the protection of offspring. Am I right?
All right, there, I was muted.
You got me.
Yep. If you do want to read it, you can pop into the Q&A and see the answered. But yeah, essentially they said, do you think a simple change to the Welfare Act to include offspring, or to clarify that they are included in that breeding for poor conformation or mental health, is not taking reasonable steps to prevent freedoms? Good. Want me to keep going?
Certainly, no. Certainly in England, and I think the UK as a whole, no dog may be kept for breeding if it can reasonably be expected on the basis of its genotype, the genes, and phenotype, the shape of the dog, or state of health that breeding from it could have a detrimental effect on its health or welfare or that of its offspring, it's already there in the law. So it's the enforcement and interpretation and the fact that, you know, not all breeders are covered by this law. That's the problem, but the law is there.
If I may add to what Carol has said around the Schedule 6, of course, as Carol rightly points out, that not all breeders are covered by them. In fact, in enforcement, anybody who is not a license holder could only be prosecuted for a Section 13 licensing offence, so not holding a licence in the first place. They couldn't be held responsible for those regulations. So that points out the weakness in enforcement.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to comment anything? No, I should move on to the next one. I can see we have a cat joined us on Rowena's screen, so we've not banished all the cats yet. If my broken, mine would be here as well. Okay, so this one's from Linda. A question for the panel. Increasingly concerning are the artificial insemination and so-called fertility clinics springing up around the UK. These clinics focus on bull breeds, in particular the English Bulldog. The results are alarmingly poorly conformed puppies. Does the panel agree that this is an area that needs urgent regulation?
Yes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it absolutely does need urgent regulation. What we're seeing as animal protection services, as we're doing our investigations, what we're seeing with fertility clinics is increasingly veterinary activities that are undertaken by people who are not vets or vet nurses, and we're very concerned about that. And that's what we're increasingly seeing. So absolutely, I think there needs to be more prosecutions for people who are undertaking these activities.
I think it's probably not generally known that unless these people are pretending to be vets, the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons can't do anything about it. So the RCVS can intervene with somebody who's saying they're a vet when they're not. But if they're not claiming to be vets, it's nothing to do with the RVC. The RVC RCVS has no powers, which is surprising. And so it comes under trading standards and so on. And so I get the impression it's very much a problem that there isn't the willpower or manpower to intervene as much as anything else, is the impression that seems to be on the veterinary forums, I think, unfortunately.
Just to add to that, of course, a lot of those AI clinics are, again, a reflection of the popularity of the typical breeds that need that sort of care. So again, over time, if the brachycephalic bubble can be burst and we can move away from this huge populations of these breeds, the need for those AI services will drop, or indeed the profitability from them, and then that will drive them to drop as well. Again, it's like everything we've had so far tonight. This whole brachy issue is just so complex, and it's been driven by so many factors, most of which are human factors, not dog factors.
Thank you, Dan. Anybody else want to make any comments? No? Okay. The next question, I'm just going to go in order, and then obviously if you're looking through the Q&A and spot a question, please feel free to jump in. This one says, since breeders are selling puppies for thousands of pounds, each are making over £1,000 profit on a litter, thereby needing a license, and therefore they come under regulations, which mean they must health test for hereditary diseases applicable to that breed. Otherwise, they do not know if they are passing on the hereditary diseases to their offspring. How can these breeders be made to have a license?
I'm quite happy for Karen. Go on, Karen.
I was just going to say HMRC, but it kind of relies on a member of the public, I think, to know about these breeders and reporting it to the local authority and then reporting it to HMRC. We've heard of a case very recently, actually, when someone has gone to enormous lengths to report a breeder that was breaking all of the regulations. And the local authority, it was difficult to identify the person who was responsible. And then the HMRC weren't responding either. But I don't know, Jake, you probably know more than me about that. So over to you.
So yeah, just touching on HMRC, they are notorious for not responding to public reports. However, we share intelligence with HMRC to their financial investigators, and actually they're incredibly helpful. They're just a bit iffy with the public, which is a bit strange. And in terms of how can we make these breeders have licenses, I guess it comes down to education on the part of local authorities as well. So I think there needs to be more training for animal welfare inspectors who are licensing breeders in local authorities, and I think that needs to happen. And then I think once people then start reporting into local authorities, they can actually appropriately action it. Currently, inspectors do not have to be qualified to the level 3 qualification. However, that will change later in the year.
Just that last question also had an element of it that was about testing for hereditary diseases. Well, that's all well and good for something like the respiratory function grading test. So there is some sort of test, but a lot of the disorders that are typical in these breeds, there isn't a test for, like corneal ulceration or skin fold dermatitis. So a lot of that does rely on having good breeders that use their experience and their knowledge to choose which dogs to breed from. So again, we're back to the complexity, and there isn't a way to test our way out of this problem. It's a human problem. It's about relying on good breeders, and it's about reducing the demand. So there is no need for these other mass-produced puppies under low welfare situations being dragged across from Ireland or Eastern Europe or wherever. So again, we're just back to the complexity, and probably the testing, a lot of it is done between the ears of the breeders. It's just by their knowledge and experience, if they're good and if they're breeding towards health, as opposed to breeding towards aesthetics. And again, that was the comment we were making earlier about just changing the whole ethos, and the good breeders are doing it. We mentioned Vicky, but some of the other good breeders out there. So it can be done. It's just, it needs to be done more.
Thank you. Okay, I will choose another question. I realize I'm pulling them all from the earliest bit, so I'll actually kind of try and space them out if we're not able to get through them all. So this question, it probably refers to a specific piece earlier on. It says, this is great in theory, but do the same rules apply to puppies bred in Northern Ireland in huge puppy farms and sold in England on under 5-star pet shop licenses?
Well, I'm happy to address this if you want, but so I mean, I'm not a legislative expert, but we obviously know that DEFRA, when they introduced Lucy's law, put in the notes that it's not intended to ban imports and criminalize those, and that was put in. It's unfortunate that was put in, and actually there is, Mark probably able to expand. There's a campaign around banning the importation of dogs under a certain age, and that's the way to fix it. However, and I think this is the key point, no matter what law anybody writes, there'll be criminals who exploit the opportunities, and I think that's the key. So yes, you know, there are loopholes in all legislation, but actually people always find a way. So it doesn't matter if we improve it or not.
Let me jump in on that one. So the history of this particular, and it is a loophole, was that when Lucy's law was passed, there wasn't a loophole, but DEFRA decided to deliberately insert one. We had this confirmed on a rather interesting Zoom call with the minister present, because they wanted to ensure that there was never a shortage of pups in the UK. So by leaving one channel open, which is the legal selling of puppies without their mum, as long as the person selling them can be claiming to breed them as well, set up a completely two-tier system of selling puppies in England, which is basically to be sold without their mum, imported from Northern Ireland in these two cases, and we're talking about two dealers in the Northwest, or obviously to sell with mum present in the place they were born, which are the two protections given by Lucy's Law. So as Jake quite rightly says, the Ban Puppy Imports campaign, if and hopefully when successful, will close this loophole, because obviously it will drive the age of imported pups up, which makes them non-desirable, and hopefully will close that loophole. And there's also activity going on behind the scenes for other ways to close it. So yeah, it was very unfortunate. It was a horrible secret to keep, because obviously we couldn't tell anyone about it, because you're basically advertising how to sell puppies without their mum in England and get around Lucy's Law. So action is being taken, progress is definitely being made behind the scenes, and hopefully we'll see an end to that particular loophole in the next few months. And hopefully with Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland now adopting Lucy's Law as well, they'll be able to write into that legislation to close it before it even happens. And obviously Lucy's Law legislation in Northern Ireland will prevent those puppies from coming into the UK anyway. So everything crossed, paws crossed, fingers crossed, we'll get to the end of this and solve it by the end of the year.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I have a question here. We are a very unusual audience. We all know about testing, but we are the minority. How do we communicate with the huge numbers who remain unaware of these welfare issues? These are not bad people, but they may not read or, sorry, the question has just jumped. Oh, I found it. Okay. They're not bad people, but they do not read or look at the small amount of media that we are producing potentially. So how do we make people more aware?
TV campaign, huge TV campaign to get to the public.
I think
I feel like, oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think you need to take it to social media, to where the influencers are and the people who are promoting the breeds. And I think it needs probably to be not just an, large organisation soundbitey thing, but, it needs to be with the same sorts of people who are fostering the popularity. If you can get some influencers and celebrities doing it on TikTok, I think that's going to have an awful lot more influence than lots of vets sitting around saying things from a scientific perspective, probably,
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say a similar thing, that it's about going to where people are getting their information at the moment. So perhaps we find out that all dog owners go to Pets at Home, for example, to buy their, I don't know, dog toys or whatever. Like you or perhaps it's social media, and you go to where people are already looking and then can work from there. I can see that someone's put Netflix documentary in the chat, which seems to be a good way of getting information out there. But it has to be really clear, targeted information about what people should do when they see those issues, or to avoid those issues in the dog they're getting. So not just awareness, but also what behaviors are necessary as well. So like to give people a kind of like a call to action, not just tell them that there's this issue there that may or may not affect any dog that they get, if you see what I mean.
And just to chip in there as well, and I'd agree with that, whoever wrote that question, I think it was David Sorgan, actually, is a wonderful question, because it goes exactly to the heart of what we need to do, which is public communication. But it is changing people's hearts, not their minds. Education is just hammering people with facts. We've done that, with research for the last decade. It hasn't made any difference. It's about changing what they want and what they believe. So I think the social media thing is absolutely correct. It could backfire, because people may well just see the images of the brachy dogs rather than the message that goes with it. But that's one of the reasons why we were using that brachy working group strapline, stop and think. So you are, and Tamsin's right, you shouldn't just say what they shouldn't do, but we're asking them, telling them or suggesting what they should do, which is to think, go and find out the evidence, go and talk to a good breeder, go and discover what are the issues with these dogs, what is it like to own one of these dogs, and then decide whether one of these dogs is right for you. So I think David's question here is really good. But advertising campaigns, first of all, is wonderful, but it's not realistic. There just isn't the money to do that. And secondly, you would have to do it forever. If advertising campaigns worked, then Coca-Cola would have advertised once 50 years ago and they'd have stopped. But they haven't stopped, they're still doing it. You need to do it forever. And even then it has a minimal impact, given relative to the amount of money you spend. So I think this is where a lot of Tamsin stuff comes in, where we're trying to get people to decide for themselves what is right, as opposed to telling them patronizingly what we believe is right.
I come in there as well, because from a point of view of rescue, we see that it's quite important that we help to educate people. And when we were first doing events 3 or 4 years ago, people were coming to us and saying, I'm amazed there has to be a rescue for French bulldogs. They're so expensive, they're so popular, everybody wants them. How can there possibly be a rescue? But I am really quite heartened to see, because we do give the brutal facts on our, we're predominantly on Facebook, we have a website, we're on Twitter, we have Instagram. And so all of the horror stories go on there as well. And I am heartened to see that more people are asking questions now and are being more aware, but it is definitely going to be a slow slog to get the word out and keep the word out.
And I think, just to add to that, Tiffany, before you go on, we need to come at it from lots of different angles, because it is such a complex issue. So it may well be angles about where these dogs are bred, or how they're bred, how they're socialized, as well as the health issues. So it is some of the bad stories, but it's multiple different bad stories, all coming to the same core call to action, which is stop and think, because that's really what we want people to do. It's to think and make up their own mind. And I think we can get there. It's just, it's going to be slow. It has happened over the decades with so many other animal welfare issues, but all of those were slow burners as well. And this one is a slow burner, but if we all work together, that's, I think it was a key message from Brenda Bonnet on the APDAWG meeting just before Christmas. It is about collaboration. So it is the breeders and the vets and the welfare people and government, etc., you know, all working together, but all with a consistent message. This kind of competitivism or even sniping between different partners in this overall work just doesn't help. It has to be collaboration.
Yeah.
And wrapping around a single message. I think, Alison, you had quite a bit of this in your talk as well, over, you know, the last 50, 100 years of breeders and vets kind of driving a wedge between the two activities.
Yeah, and it's so unhelpful, because ultimately everybody does want to promote animal welfare. They just don't necessarily come from the same starting point. And if you try to find the commonalities, it's much more productive. I see in the chat there's a lot of talk about fashion and instant gratification and so on, which I think is also a huge problem. And I think one of the things I didn't say because I ran out of time is the fashions do change. That's another thing you see from history. If you look at kennel club registrations over time, back in the 1960s, purebred poodles were as popular pro rata as Frenchies are now. And everybody was complaining about their health problems. And then they just stopped being popular. And the rise of the Frenchie was so rapid, I can't imagine that it's not going to have a decline at some point. And obviously a lot of opportunistic breeders are going to go away if the fashion isn't there. And so to some extent, time will help, I think, but perhaps there are things we can do to mitigate that as well and encourage people to more considered decisions meanwhile.
Thank you, Alison. There's a few questions kind of surrounding the idea that I guess most of the problems that are discussed are the breathing problems, but some people have suggested, is it you know, probably more effective to comment on the other issues of other organs, you know, the issues associated with the brain. which are probably more detrimental and maybe more of a deterrent to people. Does anybody want to comment on that piece?
Yeah, I think the breathing problems, that the worst ones have are bad enough, and people don't recognise those, do they? I mean, there are some shocking videos of the really bad ones that can't breathe. I don't know why another problem would be any easier to get across than one that you can see quite readily with the naked eye without imaging, you know?
It's an interesting point, actually, because the BOAS is the thing that people seem to recognise the most, but we find more the skin issues are the problem, and that's not something that you can detect with breeding. You just have to know your dogs. The good breeders have to know their dogs, but the skin problems are off the scale, and you can do every allergy test in the world, and it just comes down to the fact that the dog is effectively allergic to life, has dust mites, pollens, anything seasonal, and there's very, very little you can do about it. Interestingly, we're seeing quite an increase in cleft palates and heart murmurs as well, so that's always something worth doing more investigation into as well.
Sorry, go on. Yeah, far ahead, Rowena.
I was going to say, just from the perspective of some of our clinicians on our brachy research team at RVC, that the awareness seems to be, I'm not going to say getting there, but there's more awareness amongst some of our owners of dogs with airway disease. But we've got Frenchies coming in every week who need spinal surgery, and their owners are completely floored. They had no idea that there was such prevalent issues and such severe issues with spinal malformations in the breed. So I think, although the messaging around breathing is clearly still important and still needs to be pushed, because there is still issues around owners not understanding that is a pretty high chance for their dog being affected. I think just the wholesale issues from head to tail, I think, would be valuable and in helping owners decide, as Dan said, when they're stopping and thinking, it's not just that they've got to find a breeder out there that might be doing respiratory testing, but thinking about the whole dog, including the shape and potential health tests, and health tests that aren't yet available or maybe won't ever be available. So yeah, I think the kind of more holistic approach to overall brachy health is something we should tie into our messaging a bit more than just talking about snoring and snorting.
I was just going to make a comment here as well, that a lot of the problems that are typical in the brachy dogs are dog problems, and that may be one of the reasons why people tolerate them. So it is the dog's problem. It is a corneal ulcer. It is the dog's problem that it cannot breathe properly. It is the dog's problem. It has skin fold issues. When those become human problems, so dogs that have chronic diarrhea, suddenly that's now a human problem. Dogs that are incontinent, dogs that seizure, these now start to bother owners. And often even with skin fold, I was in practice for 20 years, often with skin fold pyoderma, owners were worried about that because of the smell, not because of the issues the dog had. So I think one of the sad things about the problems that are prevalent, highly prevalent in brachycephalic dogs is that they're mainly dog problems. And I think if there were human problems, they'd get a lot more attention from owners.
I think many of them can potentially be ignored until they've got to quite a bad severity, really. I think we've got some data showing from the work that Dan and I done on thresholding effects, where for lots of the different airway related impairments, the dog has to be getting pretty bad before the owner will potentially admit to themselves that there's a problem, and then on top of that potentially seek veterinary help. So as you say, I think we've always talked about, oh hello, sorry, we're catching this now. We've always got the issue of people ignoring things. We've said things like snoring, but across the board, as you said, in some of the vet compass work, allergies have been the biggest, or in the top 5-10 issues for, I think, all of the brachy breeds. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, I think that it's a worry that so many things can so readily be ignored by humans who are meant to have the best interest of the dogs at heart.
Years ago, I'm not sure who it was, it could have been Professor Steve Jones, said that dogs were their own worst enemy because they put up with anything. They don't complain. They can be in considerable pain, and you don't know because the dog doesn't tell you it's in pain. Has to be really in pain before it will indicate that it's in pain. And I think that's an issue that doesn't help the dog at all, that it's so stoical. And, you know, that's why humans are not really realizing how poorly their dogs are.
Which is all why that was such a good question by David, and probably goes back to that kind of core thing about trying to get owners or potential owners or current owners to think like a dog, understand what the dog is going through, which is building on what Carol has just said, feel like that dog is feeling, then decide what you want to do about it, what treatment you want to seek, or what plans you will make for future dog acquisition. So we need to move away from thinking like humans and thinking like the dog, just so that we're living their life. Very good question.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, I have one for outcrossing. Am I right in thinking that it takes 6 generations post that outcrossing mating before the offspring could be considered or registered as a pedigree? This length doesn't encourage outcrossing to improve the breeds. Could this be shortened to encourage breeders to do it more often to perhaps improve the breed, the health of the breed, sorry, perhaps for specific breeds?
I'm not sure if we still have Bill in the audience, or maybe it's too late, but Lambert might be the best one to deal with that one because it's a regulation in Kennel Club.
Can I come in there, Dan? We had a meeting with some people at the Pet Kennel Club a couple of weeks ago, and the issue of outcrossing did crop up. What the Kennel Club said is they are not against outcrossing in certain circumstances, but I think the way it would work would be someone would have to go to them with a plan, and they have an asterisk system of you know, like the first generation of an outcross will have 3 asterisks, and then the next generation will have 2, and then the next generation will have 1, and then after that it will be regarded as the original breed. I think that's what he said, Dan.
Bill's still here.
Is Bill here?
Yeah, and he's written 3 generations, not 6, in the chat.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that sounds about right, Carol. Yeah.
If Bill wants to comment, I can select allow to talk. Bill, would you like to comment?
Yeah, why don't you select allow to talk? That would be the best thing to do, I think.
Yes.
There we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
That was a surprise. I wasn't expecting to be speaking, but Carol is absolutely right. We have an asterisk system. We are not against crossbreeding, but someone has to do it in a well thought out manner for good scientific reasons. So it is something that we've done on many occasions. Many breeds have been outcrossed. There's outcrossing programs going on at the moment. I have miniature bull terriers that are from an outcrossing program. So we absolutely do. We're not against outcrossing, but it is often seen as a last resort when you have no other options no other places to go. But certainly we will consider them.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to comment any further on this piece?
At the risk of inflaming things, there is also the issue of deliberate designer breeds, which you could argue are outcrosses. So you cross a French bulldog with something else with the view of creating an animal that's healthier. And I would just flag from an epidemiological point of view that that's an illusion and it's not correct necessarily, because it might be healthier than the French bulldog, but it's not going to be healthier necessarily than the other parent. There is also a huge issue called the non-identity issue, where you have now just created another entity, whether it's a Fruggle or a Frog or whatever designer name we create. So you haven't actually helped the French bulldog at all. You've just created another designer entity and flooded the market maybe with another hugely popular designer type of animal. So again, that might be slightly controversial, but why not add a question or a suggestion or a controversial one from somebody on the panel and see what anyone thinks?
Well, if I may comment on that, I showed some outcross of the pugs, and if you talk to the breeder, Even he is very surprised to see how this next generation is improved. They're more active, the ears are more open, they see issues solved that they weren't aware of, that their pugs had trouble with. So if you just see what the benefits can be, and naturally you don't have to cross with another sick animal. You just select healthy animals, and we do know that hybrids can benefit from being outcrossed, because you are not homozygous as much as when you're inbreeding. So of course it's not just go out there and cross bad examples together. And I think it's very funny that it definitely is a part of the solution, and that people are against it, saying that it's a better solution not to do it. So what I really don't understand what the problem is using fresh blood. Everybody knows that has benefits in it.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to comment? No? Okay. There's a few questions kind of surrounding the idea of a good breeder. This particular question says, we keep saying good breeder, but how do we know, how do we know they are and what knowledge they do have? There isn't any specific training or courses they could have to undertake. There isn't any specific training or courses they have to undertake. Could that be something to consider?
I've always thought that every other profession anywhere requires qualifications, but dog breeding is one of those that requires no qualifications whatsoever.
Not fair to say, though, that neither does being a parent, but people still manage to learn how to do that.
Anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, legislation would be really tricky to impose, wouldn't it? I think David Cavill, back in the comments somewhere, sort of talked about the concept of a hobby breeder, where they're motivated primarily by their activity that they breed the dogs for, rather than purely for commercial purposes. And I think, whether the primary object is money or is love of the breed, however you word that, is a distinction, because if people are part of breed communities, even if only in an informal way, then they are talking to other people and forming their ideas in conjunction with other people. And you do get better breeding that way. I mean, Dan mentioned earlier, and I know Jane Ladlow has seen the same thing, that bulldogs have changed considerably in the show bulldog population over the last decade or so, for example, because the breed culture has changed. So I guess I'm saying that there are ways to improve things that are not formalized, but that do happen once there's an appetite for it within communities.
Just to add to that, on a case that we did yesterday in court, the district judge made comments around that anybody planning to breed dogs should research and prepare in order to breed dogs, and actually that was an aggravating feature of the case, and he was extremely displeased with the defendant that she'd done this without the prior research. In fact, he even went so far to ask the question, what age can puppies leave their parents? And the defendant couldn't answer the question. So there are serious consequences, and as a result, her sentencing, no doubt, was much harsher than perhaps she'd been able to answer those questions.
That's interesting.
For adding. Okay, we have a question. When vets visit on licensing inspections to breeders, should they have some form of training before, or do they have any form of training?
I think this is an issue that's been talked about I don't know formally, but concern that often the accompanying vet to a licensed breeder inspection is often the breeder's vet. So that vet isn't going to criticize the breeder because they're the customer. So there is this, in fact, I wanted to include it in my talk, but I left it out because I thought I was running out of time, that there should be specially qualified vets to do the inspections, and definitely should not be the breeder's vet.
Yeah, I agree. I think there needs to be change around inspections, and equally, I think it should be an independent vet, as Carol suggested, rather than somebody appointed by the breeder. We know in certain local authority areas, I won't comment, West Wales, that actually that, you know, that the vets are known with the officers that are the licensing officers, and they're all friends with the breeder as well. Of course, I think there's a conflict of interest there. So yes, I think there's got to be an independent vet and some training for them. I also believe similarly, the local authority inspectors all need to undertake this qualification, the level 3 qualification, to fully understand inspections, because at the moment I don't think they understand it. So I think the responsibility is both licensing officers and vets.
I think there are developments there. There's a City of London local authority group that will act as a steering group. I think there is the start of a qualification to do the inspections. So that's there is awareness around that, and there are attempts to try to improve this. It's known to be an issue, an important issue.
You. Would anybody else like to comment? Okay. We have a question. It says, Carol and everyone, since the regulation doesn't seem to have teeth to clamp down on the suppliers, i.e. the breeders, why not put more responsibility on buyers, such as a dog passport, something like a driver's license, perhaps, is what this individual suggests.
I'm not quite understanding a dog passport idea, but now I've forgotten the question. Sorry.
I'll tell you, don't worry. So it says, since the regulations don't seem to be able to kind of address these issues, they don't have teeth to clamp down on the suppliers, i.e. the breeders, why not put the responsibility on the buyers? And they had suggested a dog passport.
Yes, I didn't understand. I don't quite understand the idea of a dog passport, but one of the things that DBRG does, one of our main things, is to give advice to puppy buyers, and we just wish that people would find the website. But we do hear about the people that will come to us when something's gone wrong, or they haven't looked at the advice that we've given, and we've gone into quite a lot of detail about the advice, you know, what to do when you are choosing a breeder, what questions to ask. You need to know about the breed as well. So check out what are the problems that a particular breed might have, and ask the breeder about that, and take the puppy contract with you. There is already, you know, there's information for potential owners, but unfortunately, people don't seem to do a lot of research when they buy a puppy.
Thank you very much, Carol. I have a question. This is a question for each of you, if you want to comment on briefly, if there was one thing collectively, breeders, vets, charities, lawyers, whomever, should focus our energy and emphasis on right now, what would that be?
Put the dog first.
if I was to do it, would be just to repeat that mantra, stop and think. It's just trying to get people to think, and including us, to think as well about these issues and how complex they are, and to consider the world from the dog's perspective. Just think about the health issues, think about our family issues, all the things Theresa said, the reasons for relinquishment. Try and understand what you're doing when you get a dog and the responsibility that comes with it. So it's really trying to move away from instant gratification, impulse purchase, and move towards a considered decision with a long-term acceptance of the consequences.
I would agree with both Carol and Dan on that. It's the thing that we say more than anything to anybody: just do your homework, know the breed you're buying. Particularly for us, it's obviously the Frenchie, but know the breeder as well. Do your homework about them and ask lots of questions. And if they don't ask you lots of questions, then they're clearly prepared to let their dogs go to any old person. So how much do they care? How much nurture has gone into that dog? It's definitely they need to do more homework.
Yeah, I think
For me, oh, sorry, you go, Alison. Sorry.
no, you go on.
I was just going to say, for me, I think the importance of role modeling is really interesting, and I think I would encourage those breeders who have at some point done things that they now disagree with in the past to share their experiences, their stories, and how they've decided to do things differently, and how they now breed in a way that is for health, for example, to share those experiences, because those are the sorts of things that people can relate to, and that would help other breeders to think, oh, okay, yeah, maybe, you know, I'm hearing from someone who's doing things like me, but also for owners to hear the perspective of those breeders, and to hear about how those people can change their minds, and it would also promote you know, the ideas around the health issues that people sometimes ignore from someone within their own kind of community. So yeah, that would be my 2 pence, I think.
Yeah, I'd say
Right,
puppy buyers, stop and think, you know, what you're actually doing and why. And everybody else, as I said in the presentation, I think we all need to talk to each other more, because I think everybody can learn from other people about some aspect of this. And the more we engage with other people in an open way, the more progress we can make, I think, because more possibilities become available to us.
I'm not sure this is my one thing, but I think following on from what Tamsin said, I very much agree. I think particularly around the kind of not just role models from the breeder's perspective, but sharing owners' experiences. I think we're quite bad in the UK for, I guess it's partly the media, of this narrative of dogs are good for us. I'm really interested in the impact of when things go wrong with dogs, and the impact of that on the owner. And that's not taking the dog as centre stage, which is definitely what's in my heart, and you know, that's why I'm interested in this. But I think if I don't know, if owners can contemplate what their life will be with a chronically ill dog, and I think we've probably seen a lot of that with COVID and pandemic puppies, and people almost, you know, this whole thing of I'm going to be prescribed a puppy to make my life better. And I think for a lot of brachy dogs and that companionship role they fit, that they're giving their owners an awful lot, but then potentially their owners are taking a lot back from them by taking away their health. So I think the potential for sharing ownership stories of where things have gone wrong with these breeds, we absolutely see that through hospitals, and this whole thing of people thinking it won't be them because they feel like they've done their kind of due diligence, they've gone to find a breeder, you know, they've ticked some of the boxes along the, you know, the what we know is a very complex process of acquiring a puppy, and it's still happened to them. So I think that conveyance of risk is really difficult. We've probably seen that a lot with COVID, that trying to get across risks is really challenging, particularly to the general public, and you know, to puppy buyers, they probably think that it won't be them. So I'm having a good ramble now, but yeah, I think more around conveying those messages that even if they tick quite a few boxes, the likelihood is that that dog won't get through a normal lifespan and be free of all of the very long list of problems that brackies are affected by.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything? No? Okay. This question says, should images of brackies in the media, if we are going to be sharing them for whatever reason, and including rescue brackies, come with an automatic health warning?
Yeah, I'll have the first run at that one. So the Brachy Working Group spent a lot of time discussing the use of images of brachycephalic dogs in the media, social media, advertising. The view was that it just shouldn't happen unless there was a reason for it from the dog's perspective. So obviously, if Theresa is doing something related to her Phoenix Rescue Centre, it is totally legitimate to have a French Bulldog there. But if Theresa is advertising her car for sale on eBay, having a French Bulldog sitting on the bonnet just is not appropriate. So it shouldn't happen in the first place unless there's a reason for it.
And just say I've received a dog into rescue only earlier this year, a puppy, so only just inoculated. And the inoculation card, the vaccination card that came with the dog from the vet had Frenchies all over it from a vet. I was quite shocked. What would you do about that? Should there be a report made, or?
No, I think genuinely there is nobody that sets, this is my view of dog breeding, there is nobody that sets out to do harm to dogs. And that's kind of my basic start point. Now, obviously, there will be some exceptions to that. But by and large, everyone who breeds a dog is probably doing it for some reasons related to dogs, that they like dogs or they care for dogs. We have to start from that point of view, that people aren't evil. If people make mistakes, those are just genuine mistakes or errors of judgment. That might have been fine 10 years ago when French Bulldogs made up 0.1% of the population. It probably was absolutely fine. It just is no longer appropriate. You know, it probably would have been fine for me to be sitting here smoking cigarettes 20 years ago on a forum like this. It just no longer is fine and appropriate. So it isn't about public censure, but it is about gently suggesting that there is a broad consensus from Brachy Working Group, which involves all the major stakeholders, that we should not be advertising brachycephalic dogs in any way unless there is a benefit for the dogs themselves from a welfare perspective. And it should be done as gently as that. But I think the wider that message goes, and it can be a network thing where people just tell people who just tell people in a gentle, positive, supportive way. It's what Allison said, it needs to be a conversation, certainly should not be censure.
I can add to that, in the Netherlands, there's also an NGO who has made an effort for stopping brachycephalic in the media. And a lot of shops and large companies are sensitive to their call, and now saying they will, they declare they will not use those images in the future. So it's working in some way.
Exactly, and that's kind of the bandwagon starts to roll and the message gets out there. The more difficult place to get that message is on social media, where it's individuals. Organizations have a reputation. They're at risk if the general public, feel that they're being anti-welfare. On a personal basis, it's slightly harder to get that message across.
And that's a hard battle, because in the Netherlands we had even last week. There's a very popular singer, a Dutch singer, who's starting a TV show, and he has a French bulldog, and of course makes a post with his cute dog, and all the fanatics against it, telling, oh, you're doing the wrong thing of showing him off, and now everybody's angry. And I think that's a missed opportunity to talk like we do tonight to each other. Why is this an issue, and why are people concerned? And maybe trying to put this singer to make the awareness and use his TV time to talk about his dog and the problems and the issues. So I think that's we should benefit from these opportunities.
Correct, and that's exactly what we've done on Brachy Working Group. We have reached out on a direct basis, one-to-one, without going public, and then try to change actions and views and try to get positive messaging, positive from a brachy welfare perspective from those influencers. So absolutely, yeah.
Thank you all. This question is for Jake. At what point would you attempt to prosecute based on conformational criteria? For example, would you attempt to prosecute exotic woolly breeding, and how about Cavalier? I believe this is King Charles, KC.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in order to prosecute for a Section 4 or Section 9 offence, so the welfare offences, a vet has to agree that that dog had suffered unnecessarily, or that its needs had not been met. If a vet came to me and said, "This is what I'm presented with, here's veterinary certificate that says that this dog has suffered or is likely to suffer," then we would definitely consider prosecution. So the short answer is, if a vet would support that, and the evidence supports that, then we would be able to prosecute.
Thank you very much. I'll guess we'll take it one or two more, Mark. We're just coming on 10.
Yeah, we just come up to 10. I reckon let's do one more, because it's a good old 3 hours, and I think people have probably got other things to do right now. So we'll do one more and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Does anybody want to grab one that they see, or you want me to continue on? I think Dan.
Tiffany, there was just one message, the very final one here. Jackie Mavro Michaelis has posted a question earlier, but obviously it didn't get into this list, and has asked if we could ask that. I'm not sure what it was, but just because she specifically asked.
Yes, go right ahead. Oh,
yeah, I'm not sure what it was. I don't have access to the earlier questions.
Oh, okay.
Not sure if that's possible. If it's not, don't worry.
Do you say it was Jackie?
Yes.
Not in the.
I believe it's the question is, what size samples were used to establish your numbers on the brachy issues you reported? I think that's the question.
Okay. Was that asked of me or Rowena?
It was a general question. I can't see it aimed at anybody in particular.
Oh, okay. So so if I do my one, so on the studies that I reported there, the most recent papers, the skin-fold dermatitis ones, they're based on 900,000 dogs. The 2016 ones were based on 525,000 dogs, so 500,000 dogs. So the sample sizes for those studies are huge, by far and away the biggest sample sizes for studies like that anywhere in the world. So those ones are huge. Yeah, that's an easy one to answer. Thank you. Yeah. Tiffany, sorry, I hijacked you. If you wanted to do your final question, I hijacked you on that one.
No, that's perfect. I wanted to be able to give you all the opportunity. If you did see a question you wanted to kind of comment on that I didn't pick up on, there are still 53 questions there. But
do you mind if I just answer this one very quick question, if you don't mind? Sorry, I know that we're going for the last question. It's that there's a question that says, what happened to the increased sentence bill for animal cruelty offences? Is there a plan in place to represent it? And the answer is that the bill is actually moving currently through the House of Commons, and will be in the committee stage, report stage, shortly, and actually had a committee debate earlier in the month. So we're very hopeful that that bill is passed. Keeping my fingers crossed.
Thank you, Jake. Dan, I see here in the chat, it says, Dan, she meant CFR.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
Yeah, sure. I assume this probably relates to Jackie's question. Vicky has said she meant CFR.
Oh, craniofacial ratio. I think that might be you then, Rowena. Or it might be Marianne, maybe with some of the Dutch studies.
I think it should be Claire Rustbridge.
No, I follow the research of Rowena and yourself, so I think it's not for me to answer.
Maybe we'll have to find the answer and send it out through the newsletter, Mark.
Absolutely, we'll do what we can. Okay, I think this is a good time to wrap it up. We've done just over 3 hours, a good hour of chat. I hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as I have, and I think Tiffany has. Want to say a huge thank you to the speakers, first of all, to Carol, to Jake, to Alison, to Dan, to Rowena, to Tamsin, to Marianne, and to Theresa. They've just brought so much knowledge to APDAWG tonight, and a special thanks to Dan actually for helping me organise tonight as well. A special thank you to obviously Dr. Lisa Cameron MP and her rescue Frenchie Rossi, who we didn't meet tonight, but we have met before. I'm sure we'll meet again. To UK Centre for Animal Law and Our Dogs for supporting us. Special obviously thank you to you, Tiffany, for masterminding it all. Brilliant from the techie side of things and asking all the picking out the questions. For me with APDAWG, it's always about collaboration, as I keep boring everyone with that word, but to keep the conversation going, to keep the dialogue positive and respectful and make progress. And someone said earlier, I think it was Marianne, to benefit from the opportunities, and that's kind of campaigning, grassroots campaigning in a nutshell. And I hope Dan and Rowena agree with me that if anyone has any suggestions and they want to keep the conversation going, then to contact the Brachiocephalic working group, because they're making great progress, and that's a great conversation to be in. Obviously, if you enjoyed tonight, then tell people about it. Go on to Twitter mainly. APDAWG1 is our Twitter handle, #APDAWG. I will retweet your comments as long as they're nice and positive and friendly in the spirit of collaboration. And just to recap, the 4 events I mentioned right at the beginning. The next APDAWG, the March one, will be at the end of March. We haven't decided the date yet. It'll be the 23rd or 30th, but it'll be about Romanian rescues and overseas rescues. We have another event on the 18th of March, which is a top secret at the moment, and all will be revealed if you subscribe to our newsletters. We have an event, well, we're supporting an event on this Thursday about support dogs, rescue dogs becoming support dogs. That's at 7 p.m. So check out the support dogs website, or we have retweeted the event in our APDAWG feed. And then ALAW, UK Centre for Animal Law, are also having a dog welfare event this Friday, which is 12 till 4 p.m, which has still got some places as well. And we've retweeted that on our Twitter feed as well. So loads of dog welfare conversations going on. My advice would be to get involved in all of them if you can, and keep the conversations going on all sorts of levels, and collaborate and be polite and be respectful, and we will make progress. As I think we have tonight. So a huge thank you from me and Tiffany and all the gang in APDAWG, and keep subscribing. And a dankje, I just had to Google thank you in Dutch, a dankje to Marianne, and a thank you to everybody else, because it's been a fantastic, entertaining and interesting evening, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as we have. So good night, stay safe, and thanks for sticking around for 3 hours.
Could I just ask Tiffany, there was some really good links in the chat to other things. Where can we find those after this closes, please?
I can download both the Q&A and the chat and provide to you all.
Oh, fab. Thank you very much.
There you go. And also it's worth noting that every speaker has put their own email address or their own point of contact on their presentation. So this will be recorded, this will go online. So feel free to go back and email individual speakers. I'm sure everyone will be happy to address questions that you may think of afterwards or haven't been answered tonight. So thanks again. Thanks for supporting APDAWG and choosing to spend 3 hours on a Tuesday night with us all, and hope everyone's learned something and found it very worthwhile. And we'll hope to see you again very soon. Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Good evening. Bye.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Tiffany. Bye-bye.